We are about to start, so off we go. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Performance of Finance Scrutiny. Today, the 19th of January, 2022. And I must confess, we have an absolutely massive agenda today. So the way we are going to try and do this is to try, A, we aim to go home tonight. B, is to try and finish it on time, hopefully, or earlier. So if there's, I must be honest, I'm being very frank, as per usual. If any grandstanding happens, I'll put a stop. Yeah? That includes me. So no grandstanding today. So the way the first one or two sessions would happen, the presentation will take place, then the questions, and please, I beg of you, keep the questions short. No statements, because there's no requirement for a statement. Are we ready to go? Yes, off we go. Thank you. Apologies for absence, Catherine.
I've received apologies from Councillor Tapper, and Councillor Chapman is attending virtually today.
Thank you very much. That means, Councillor Chapman, you will not be able to vote today, and welcome. And others who are present can vote. Minutes of the previous meeting. Any comments, any observations? None? Accepted? Agreed? Proposal, beg your pardon.
Other one. Thank you, Councillor Bagenham. Just to say that the updates, it would be appreciated if they could come out maybe within 2 weeks, so the request for information, maybe within a couple of weeks of the requests for the information being made, as opposed to within a few days before the meeting occurring, if that could be noted, please.
It's a very good point. I mean, we will endeavor to get the updates as early as possible. In fact, I had to make a decision on one of the updates, which I will update, which I'll say in a minute. So thank you for that. Any comments, any observation on the minutes? If it's agreed, I need a proposal, please. Proposed by Councillor Morgan. I need a seconder. Seconded by Councillor White. All those in favour. Thank you for the reminder. Everyone in favour. Off we go. Thank you. And do I sign it now or later? Now? Okay. Thank you, Catherine. Declaration of interest. Any declarations of interest? I see none. Thank you. Environment and off we go onto agenda. Before I go on to agenda, we are not doing agenda item 12, which is public realm task and finish group today, because the papers are about to be circulated this morning. I told the officer not to, because it is too late, and it's a very important report. So I have held it back. So it'll be carried forward into the next meeting, if it's agreed by the officers and the committee. Yes? Thank you. Right, on to agenda item 4, Environment and Health Executive Portfolio Update. Councillor Manfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members, and thank you for inviting me to come and speak with the team this evening to you, and so that you can scrutinise the work that we're doing and the future undertakings. Before I do start, I'd just like to say that I'm sure all aware, the last 18 months has seen unprecedented circumstances, and before we actually start to go into the various aspects of the portfolio, I'd like to just put on record my thanks to the officers and the team that we'll be speaking tonight. Without their commitment and dedication, we wouldn't have achieved a number of things that this council has continued to achieve and deliver to our residents. I just will park on one particular point. This portfolio is very much involved with our residents. It's very much a people's portfolio, and it's fantastic that we have continued to deliver all of the services during some extremely difficult times. So I do thank all of the officers, and I would like the officers obviously to pass that on to their teams as well. I'd also just like to say, if I may, a big thank you to Tim Passion, former Chief Exec, for all of his help during those difficult times. So let's get on with this evening. I'd like to, first of all, introduce the team. We have Nick Stevens here, who's the Strategic Director for Environment and Community, Kelly Goldsmith, who's Partnership Director for Joint Waste Solutions. Both these team members are new to the Council. Joe Chauhan, Head of Operations with Joint Waste Solutions, is joining us online. Sarah Beck is in the room, and she's the Operations Manager West for Joint Waste Solutions. Darren Williams is the Corporate Head of Community Services, and he is here. Ben Sword is the Engagement, Wellbeing and Events Manager. James Robinson, who's joining online, is the Senior Environmental Health Officer. And Anne Goldeman is the Climate Change Officer. And also Francis Soper, who is the Environment, Health and Licensing Manager. What I'd like to do, members, I've spoken to the chairman to check it's okay, is we're going to have a short slide presentation from Joint Waste Solutions by Kelly Goldsmith, and also we're going to have a slide presentation of the background with regards to the community services and what we're doing within those two portfolio areas. The actual portfolio itself, we cover air quality, community services, emergency planning and business continuity, waste and recycling, and health and well-being. I think it's the slides, it's fair to say, obviously all the slides will be sent out to the councillors following this evening's briefing, and obviously all the other details are within the packs that have been sent to you and also online. So if I may, Mr. Chairman, I'll undertake first of all the presentation by Joint Waste Solutions.
Thank you very much. Before you start, Kelly, I want to make an important introduction. I'd like to introduce you to Nick Stevens, who is our Strategic Director for Environment and Community. So most of the portfolio we'll be discussing today falls under him.
Yeah.
Thank you. Carry on, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Mansfield. Can we pop up the presentation slides? So the presentation is going to be a joint presentation between myself and Sarah. The areas, if we could go on to the next slide, thank you. The areas that we want to provide information and updates on today include how we manage the contract with Amy on behalf of Surrey Heath Borough Council, issues that have been affecting the service and how these have been managed, so things like our response to COVID-19 and the garden waste collection service, our contract performance, how we're doing, and areas of service improvement. If we can go on to the next slide. Thank you. So within Joint Waste Solutions, the operations team is responsible for the management of the Amy collection contract, and it's managed by Sarah with the West team. They carry out a range of activities, including monitoring the services, delivering improvement projects, and investigating and responding to any complaints. The wider Joint Waste Solutions team also plays an active role in delivering services across Surrey Heath. So we design and deliver a number of projects that help to improve participation, increase recycling across the contract area. We undertake data analysis, and we also carry out communications on behalf of Surrey Heath Borough Council. The annual service guide would be a key example of something that we've produced for the authority. As well as the programme of work, which is delivered by the Joint Waste Solutions team, Amy are also required to provide an annual service plan, which sets out key projects and areas for improvement, and we'll be touching on that later in the presentation. So I'm just going to hand over to Sarah, if we can go on to the next slide.
Thank you, Kelly. So I'll start by starting with the COVID-19 continued response. I'm sure we've all heard a lot of COVID-19, and unfortunately it continues to have an impact on the service. And whilst restrictions have been lifted more recently, we have continued to monitor the situation with Amy very closely and be responsive to any changes in staffing levels. Overall, waste volumes do remain still significantly high, and that's because people are still spending quite a bit of time at home. But we are still meeting with Surrey County Council as well as the other districts and boroughs. Previously, we have met on a weekly basis, but that now has moved to monthly, and those meetings are used to review and discuss feedback collectively and collaboratively. So an example of that would be when we were looking at taking measures to minimise the risk of sharing collection crews across the boundaries, for example. If I may have the next slide. Now, moving on to probably the most pressing topic of conversation currently, the garden waste service update. So, as I'm sure we'll all be very much aware, we have seen a significant impact to the garden waste collection service. Driver shortages, I think it's safe to say, have been widely reported by the press. And unfortunately, this issue has led to Amy's limited ability to retain staff and obviously recruit staff. And unfortunately, as vacancy rates increased, so too does the risk to delivering all our services. So, whilst the decision was not taken lightly, in line with our business continuity plans, the existing ones, and in line with DEFRA guidance, the garden waste service was reduced July and early August to a monthly service. And then towards the end of August, unfortunately, that did mean that the garden waste service was suspended in order to prioritise the core services of recycling, refuse and food waste collections. Whilst not all authorities might see sort of the same impact, we have taken part in some surveys with the Local Authority Recycling Advisory Committee, otherwise known as LAREC. And we can say that other authorities have seen impacts, some to the garden waste service, some to their other core services. So it isn't just us. And I think it's safe to say that the Q3 was, which is October, November, and December of 2021, was certainly the most problematic time for service impact. If I may have the next slide. So since the start of the service disruption, we have worked very closely with Amy to try and create the best, or support the best service that we can with the limited resources that we have available. And we have achieved this since September by running a reduced garden waste collection service. So through that, we're planning and communicating the delivery of the garden waste service in one area at a time across the 4 authorities. So we share the resources in order to deliver a cycle, one authority after another. Amy were required to submit a recovery plan and attend a briefing with the partnering board to update on the situation and obviously explain the actions they're undertaking to try and reinstate the service. As it stands, I'm pleased to say we do anticipate an improved service. We currently got proposals to retain a monthly service from mid-February. Obviously, going forward, we are very much pushing Amy for a service reinstatement. We are aware, obviously, a fortnightly reinstatement of the service is a priority. We are pushing Amy very much for the spring peak, but we do obviously have to balance the risk that if we reinstate the service, we would like to reinstate it at a sustainable level, that is what we are working towards. If I may have the next slide. Thank you. So in terms of where Amy are currently with the driver recruitment, a key area of their recovery plan has been looking at putting the measures in place to fulfil the recruitment gap and obviously to limit further loss of staff. Amy did identify that training has been sort of a key way to keep their numbers, and as such they have opened up their training programme by bolting on an intensive driver training programme as part of their current apprenticeship scheme, and they have had some good take-up on that, which is wonderful news. They've also increased the number of places available on the training programme, and as well as recruiting that internally, they are now extending that externally. So we are seeing some good feedback from that. To find a bit more of a short-term solution, which obviously Amy did need to do, back in September they did introduce some retention and bonus schemes, which do seem to have worked well. Some other actions that Amy have taken. They've expanded the range of organisations that they're liaising with in order to try and attract staff. So as well as expanding their list of agencies, they're also using their existing schemes. So for example, they would seek potential employment from people who may have previously worked in the military, and they have now expanded that to other organisations. A good example of that is those supporting refugees, which I think is an excellent move on their part. Finally, in December, Amy also did implement a market supplement to provide a bit more of a competitive rate, again, to attract more employment. Thank you. So just moving on to the current kind of capturing and monitoring of performance. In terms of monitoring Amy's performance, we measure this against a suite of KPIs. I think it obviously goes without saying that if any of these are ever failed, it does result in the appropriate deductions. We also use and capture weighbridge ticket tonnage data, and from this information we are able to provide some data-led interventions. In terms of our quarterly reports, there are two. JWS do provide a quarterly report directly to Surrey Heath Borough Council, providing information on the number of misbins per 100,000, as well as the percentage of streets falling below a grade B. Now, just to provide a slight bit of explanation to that, because that probably doesn't make too much sense. The percentage of streets falling below grade B is essentially a measure of street cleanliness. The target is set at 4%, and I'm pleased to say that Surrey Heath are well within that. In the last quarter, the failing was 0.5%, so significantly well within that target. And in terms of the misbins, the target of not to exceed is 80 per 100,000, and in the last quarter it was a mere 39 per 100,000, so working well within those KPIs. There's also an SEP quarterly report that's provided by the SEP, Environment Partnership, to all SEP members, shares information on all the Surrey districts and boroughs, and does have some sort of trend information and provides some explanation. All of those, the latest report is available on the Surrey Environment Partnership website. Thank you. So just to provide a couple of graphs of where Surrey Heath currently sits, looking at total waste. This graph, as it probably states in the title, represents the total waste generated in Surrey Heath, in this example from 2017 until September 2021. Now you'll see overall the years there's some fluctuations, but if we review the latest data, so 2021/2022, which is the deep blue line, you'll see, as per usual, there's some great fluctuations. Now there was a peak sort of May, June time, and then a significant decline as we moved down into September. Now, we just have to bear in mind that's not uncommon, particularly with COVID-19. We have seen some very bizarre changes in waste generation. Other districts and boroughs very, very similar, so that's not unusual. But also we have to bear in mind seasonal variations, and any work that we've kind of done, and we have done a lot of work to improve recycling, may impact these rates. So if I may move on to the next slide. So looking at the recycling rate, again, you'll see all the years, 2017 until present day, there are some major fluctuations. The deep blue dipping line there does represent the current year, but I would just like to say that the recycling rate is calculated based on waste recycled, reused and composted, so it does take into account garden waste. So unfortunately that drop is as a result of the suspension to the service, but with the plans we do have in place to try and bring the service back up to the normal level, we're quite confident we can boost that back up to the proud levels that Surrey Heath have in the region of 60 to 61%, putting us in that very proud position of 5th place nationally. So we're quite confident on that recovery. Now, I'll very briefly just say, because I did mention this before, the misbins per 100,000, that red line there is the target of 80, and as you can see from a Surrey Heath perspective, we're well below that, so we're performing quite well in terms of the misbins per 100,000. I'll just now hand over to Kelly, who'll discuss the resource and waste strategy and the annual plan.
Thank you. Yes, so just to outline, the Resources and Waste Strategy was published in December 2018, and it outlines a number of objectives and targets for all authorities to meet going forwards. There's an objective to have a 55% recycling rate by 2025, a 65% recycling rate by 2035, and for all households to have the ability to participate in food waste collections which currently is in place for 2023, although we're awaiting further guidance. There's also some other areas that have been out as public consultations in recent years. So we had consultations in 2019 and again in 2021, looking at some future policies which could look at having extended producer responsibility for packaging, so making the packaging producers responsible for what they produce and for ensuring it gets recycled and the cost attributed to that. Deposit return schemes, which is, paying a deposit on having a bottle, and then when you return it, you get that deposit back. Having consistency in curbside collections, so all the materials that you can collect at your curbside will be consistent whichever county you live in, and trying to streamline the methodology or the approach that's taken for those collections to take place. And then the last one is having an increase in plastic tax, so taxing producers basically. If we could go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we've been doing some work in line with Surrey Heath's 5-year strategy to look at developing some annual plan targets for 22-23. And Sarah's already touched upon sort of the impact on the recycling rate as a result of the garden waste suspension. So our modelling shows that by the end of 21-22, so by the end of March, we hope to be able to deliver a 58% recycling rate, which will be a drop, obviously, from what it was last year. It's not as much as a drop as we anticipate, and that's because the bins that have been collected have been heavier. People are obviously filling the bins up more, so the weight of those that are coming through the network, have been greater. Moving into 22-23, that's where we hope to get the service back up and running and be able to go to increase your recycling rate back to current levels. What we're then looking at doing is putting in plans to increase that beyond the 61% towards that 65% target and perhaps, even past that. Looking at the residual waste per household, as we've mentioned, with more people working from home, we are seeing increased tonnages in the system, and a lot of that is being realised through the residual waste, so through the general waste that's coming through. So you can see from those figures that in 2021 we saw an increase of around 40 kilograms per household, which is quite a significant amount. What we're looking to do now is working to prevent that from increasing further, if we possibly can, by encouraging people to recycle as much as they can, and as well as recovering that garden waste service, and also trying to encourage some behaviour change, particularly on the food waste element. The next bit that we're focusing on is the quality of the dry mixed recycling that's coming through the network. So the better the quality material, the better the chances of getting that material away to market and getting a greater income for that product. So what we're starting to do now is look at putting some targets in place to enable us to improve the quality of that recycling and reduce contamination levels. Generally, the materials recycling facilities, or MRFs as they're known, like to see the material less than 10% contaminated. Surrey Heath has got good quality material, so we're actually trying to keep that around the 8% mark because we think that is something that's achievable. And then what we're also looking to do is increase the number of flats that have ability to access food waste collections, so those that have got communal properties. At the moment, 42% of flats across Surrey Heath have the ability to access a food waste collection. What we're looking to do is increase that to around 60 to 65%. What we're doing at the moment is analysing, which of those properties we actually have the ability to put those collection arrangements in place. So that target will be finalised in the coming weeks. And then in 23-24, that's when we hope to maximise that to have the collections. We're also doing a piece of work to see if that could be accelerated in any way to bolster those collections in Surrey Heath and the other contract areas. Next slide, please. Sarah.
Thank you again, Kelly. So just to end on a very big high, I think that despite all the talks of garden waste suspension and driver shortages and COVID-19, there has also this year been some significantly fantastic improvements delivered And Surrey Heath really has been a shining example of the results of that. I'm pleased to say that we have managed to implement some contamination reduction at flats. This has been achieved through communication with residents, but also the implementation of some new style bins. That has meant that some sites where previously we would never have been able to have taken some recycling, we are now getting some tonnage. So the residents are also very engaged in it, which I think is excellent news. We've also successfully delivered a recycling champion engagement package to the collection operatives. So we've trained them as recycling champions, empowered them. They've really taken ownership of checking for contamination. And this has led to a significant reduction in the amount of rejected loads. So just for a bit of comparison, when we started the training back in February 2021, there were 28 rejected loads over the previous few months. By the time we got to November and December of 2021, we were down to just 3. So a massive reduction. To put a bit of perspective on that, that accounts for 89.8% saving of DMR, which is a tonnage of 423 tonnes that was saved from going to landfill and instead went to the MRF, which I think is an excellent step in the right direction. There's also been some targeted interventions. We've used, as I said earlier on, we've used the data that we can see to write to households where we've noticed multiple contamination incidents. So we're really getting to that resident level of engagement. We're trialling some new style textile bins and small appliance bins, which really do seem to be falling well with the residents. They really are taking that up. Also working with Amy on what we call a Power BI dashboard. This is where we can really sort of nail down into how the crews are reporting missed bins. If we notice a particularly problematic crew or a particularly problematic area, we've got sort of this dashboard that's very clever, really narrows down to the crew, the area, and we can work directly with them to the source. So we look at missed bins not just per 100,000, but this helps us really dig into the detail. Working together on the health and safety aspect, what Amy would refer to as close calls, some very effective campaigns out there, but also some site-specific targeted interventions. We're working with managing agents, sites where we've had to make some special adaptations to bins. We've had someone come in and modify bins, so there's some really positive work ongoing. If I may have the next slide. And just, as I say, again, to kind of build on what Kelly was saying, there's more coming and very soon. We do plan on expanding the communal food waste collection service, which is kicking off, as we say, in the coming weeks. So excellent news. But I think something I'm very excited about is what we're calling the crew induction video. And I've just recently mentioned the crew engagement programme. It's been so successful delivering that virtually with the crews. We realised that we kind of need a way of making this a long-term solution. So what we're creating is a video that basically replicates the same education that we've given to the current crews. And the idea is that video will be shown to all new members of staff as part of their induction programme, and it will focus on how important they are at helping us improve the quality of the recycling, increase the recycling rates, and obviously how they can help us achieve that. I think that's certainly it from me, so thank you for listening.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you very much. Good presentation. Definitely I learned a lot. I must confess. So,
If we may, Mr. Chairman, I'm obviously this is, to engage all the members. I would like to just, if we can, just continue with the community services and then do a full question session, if you're happy to. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Damon.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation this evening. If the slides can go up, thank you. Okay. So I'm here this evening to talk about year one of the formal community services partnership between Surrey Heath Borough Council and Runnymede Borough Council. So as you will be aware, Surrey Heath have worked in partnership with Runnymede for 6 years now in areas of prevention services and the wider community services agenda. And in November 2020, the executive approved entry into a formal partnership. And I must stress the word partnership there, a shared service approach which was hosted by Runnymede, but you will never hear the term lead authority or anything else. It very much is a partnership of equals. There's shared financial risk and reward, a joint partnership board, a commitment to retaining a focus on local service delivery, as well as a local presence of staff teams to work with fellow officers of the council, elected members, but also to be approachable and contactable by residents, both at this building and in the community. And also that we're accountable to both authorities, which is why I guess I'm sat here tonight. So obviously that bit's working, if nothing else. But the first year has been very much about implementing the partnership during what has been a really challenging time, but we all know that, and not to use that as an excuse anywhere. We successfully 2P transferred the staff, not a small undertaking, a significant number of staff, but actually it was about making sure that they didn't just 2P transfer out of one authority into another, but there was a true understanding of why and how it could make us more efficient and more responsive as a team, and how working together in this way would actually give us greater resilience going forward. In doing so, it's allowed us to implement our new ways of working, which has been helpful as we try to balance the impact of lockdown service demands, close contacts, positive cases, with maintaining a level of service delivery by using our resources where appropriate across both boroughs, transport drivers, day centre staff, meals delivery drivers, etc. We have worked on developing team dynamics, which I would say is work in progress. That's about forming relationships, building trust, and actually being comfortable with the arrangement that we're in. And I think over the year, people have become more comfortable with the arrangements, but I'm not going to sit here and say we're 100% completed on that part. We've introduced the partnership board, and in doing so, we've agreed the governance arrangements that were set out in the contract, but that were equally amended to reflect sort of the nature in which the partnership board would be delivered going forward. And those were agreed at the last meeting that was only last week. In doing so, the partnership board's equally about building new arrangements, particularly between elected members from both authorities, so that actually everyone in that room is on the same page and mindful of the fact that this is a partnership of equals and not a position of one as the lead and one as the outsourcer, so to speak. And then with that comes this need to work with complete transparency. And this is where I've been here long enough, and probably you've heard enough from me to know that that's my absolute commitment, that I'm here to do a job for Surrey Heath in the same way I am for Runnymede, both for the council and its residents. And if we move to the next slide, as you will see, there has been an audit undertaken in 21-22 internally by Surrey Heath. So the partnership agreement that was signed states that Surrey Heath can select an area of the partnership and undertake its own audit of it at any time during a year. And this year the decision was to look at how it was implemented, whether what I sat in front of you and discussed in November and what was signed in the agreement was actually delivered or not. Now, the audit is ongoing. Some further information has been sent through just today, but the quote that I put into the slides that you will have received gives a strong assurance at the moment that what we said we would do, we did, and that we have good governance across the partnership. Moving on to the next slide, it outlines the 7 areas of service delivery that come under the Community Services Partnership. Those are the things that are directly delivered, but it's appropriate to say there's also a role of community services working closely with other areas of this council on a prevention agenda and when working towards improving the wider determinants of health. So in particular, housing, the way in which we keep people independent at home through disabled facilities grants, the work around the obesity project and around undertaking of recreation and physical activity. Colleagues from the council leading in those areas, but we've worked closely with them as well. So it's not just a case that we only focus on these things. To give you an idea, when we've looked at how we align these in the partnership, we've tried to make sure we take the strength out of both areas in order to improve on the areas that perhaps aren't as strong. And a good example of that is with no administrative support for our tech service or community alarms as we would know it at Surrey Heath for the time that I've been here. The first point of contact and the customer service element for residents is actually delivered from Addleston. But in contrast to that, Meals at Home for the partnership is actually coordinated from Camberley. Because, to put it bluntly, Surrey Heath were outperforming in Meals at Home over Runnymede. So why wouldn't we take that learning and that positive performance and apply it across the partnership? And that's what we've done. Just to add to that dynamic, the handyman service that is listed is actually coordinated and delivered by Woking Borough Council on behalf of 5 local authorities in this area of the county. So we've tried to make sure we retain our local base, so we're still based in this office. We've streamlined our administration and coordination processes, and in doing so, we've been able to create more resilience within our services, which actually has meant that they have largely continued to deliver throughout the pandemic. As we move on, I highlight the importance, so the next slide, sorry. Thank you. Went all Chris Whitty for a minute then. So as we move forward, and even today, and particularly given what's going on in the world, partnership working within an integrated health system is key to the development, sustainability of our prevention services. Again, this goes right across the whole council, but I would say in the last 12 months there has definitely been a significant step forward for the council in the way it engages with health and social care partners, and actually the way in which we're viewed now as a can-do partner to deliver more and better for the system, and crucially for the residents who access the health system locally. The slide towards the bottom, so apologies that it's not on the screen, but there are a number of areas of work through population health management, integrated care, the local joint commissioning group, where representatives of community services currently work alongside Frimley CCG and other partners. And I can only see this continuing to develop in the future, not just with the CCG, but actually with the Acute Trust and also the GP Federation locally. Moving into performance, it's a bit of a mixed bag, which, to be quite honest, wasn't to be unexpected given the times that we're in. But equally is important that I give you a bit of a narrative around this. There are services that have continued to perform throughout, which saw spikes during the early lockdown stages of service delivery as more people required them. Meals at Home is an obvious one, which people will turn to and continues to perform well. And as does our community alarm service, which when I started here 6 years ago, there were about 580 people using that service. We're now benefiting or supporting almost 1,100 residents through that service. What I'd say is, whilst numbers don't grow in that area in a rapid sense, there also is the reality that people leave the service, whether it's because they're no longer with us, sadly, whether they move into residential care, whether they move out of the area. There are lots of reasons why. So we have a staff team who run as hard as possible. Sometimes it feels like to stand still, but actually all they're continuing to do is to support the new group of residents who come through the system. Social prescribing is seeing a period of recovery as we come out of sort of successive lockdowns and impacts of the pandemic. As more of those community assets, those voluntary and community organisations open up, and also as people turn back towards their GPs and other health professionals for support with what are actually non-medical needs. So bearing in mind people try to stay away from GP practices, particularly during the first stage of vaccination rollout. Now there is a return which is prompting the referral onto social prescribing that then supports them with their non-medical and social needs. The handyman service and linked to the HomeSafe Plus, which is our hospital discharge service, they are just getting going. And actually the trend that we see there is reflective of the trend we saw in North West Surrey when trying to establish the same hospital discharge service. The numbers are slowly creeping, but the most important and positive outcome of this year, I would say, is now that Frimley Park Hospital and some key individuals in there, and also Farnham Hospital, are on board with the concept that we're promoting and actually see it as something that is valuable both to promote and enable timely hospital discharge, but also longer-term prevention of admission. The next step for that, which is what we're just embarking on in North West, and we will follow it through here as well, is actually using it in the community so people have timely access to borough services so that we can either delay or prevent the need for them to present at a hospital in the first place, working with community health partners, with voluntary sector partners as we go. And that's particularly important with the new discharge models that they have in place, and in particular those who are classed as Pathway Zero, which are those people who have no ongoing health or social care support. There are those that have been affected, sorry, too, or you jumped in then, sorry. So there are those that have been affected, and I'm not going to gloss over them and hope you don't ask. So community transport and Windle Valley Centre, both significantly impacted by the pandemic. And actually, we are slowly seeing a recovery, but as we move on to the next slide, you will see recovery is at the heart of the plan for 22-23. We really now need to push on in bringing those services back to life, re-engineering them in a way that meets the needs now of residents, not what they were prior to the pandemic, that meets the needs now, and actually allows us to make sure we're maximising the use of our assets as a council. But we don't just intend to recover, there is the intention to grow and to develop. That's not just the services listed in the previous slides, but actually new opportunities to find those way forward, working in partnership with health and social care partners, and to find the unmet needs in communities that, in an appropriate and prudent way, the council can support to enable residents to live longer at home in an independent way and live active lives in their community. That said, we have a requirement to be responsive to the corporate priorities and challenges of Surrey Heath Borough Council as a partnership, and therefore I'm acutely aware of the need for financial efficiency wherever possible, and also to identify potential opportunities for income generation. But as discussing with the Chief Executive and the corporate management team this week, that isn't necessarily about using the word cut. It's about how can we continue to deliver what is required by residents, but in the most cost-effective way in order to do so. So to give one example, our Meals at Home service that is operated in both boroughs, both councils lease a fleet of 8 vehicles, and we both deliver meals at exactly the same time. Just by going back out for new leases for 22-23, if we re-engineer one side of the partnership, so let's say, so that I don't get shot down, it'll be Runnymede, that they start to deliver their service in the early evening, so there's almost an evening provision with a lunch pack delivered as opposed to the lunch hot meal and tea pack we do here at the moment, then actually we can reduce a fleet of 8 vehicles to possibly a fleet of 4 or 5. So we haven't affected anyone. We will still support those who, for medical reasons, care arrangements, need their meals at lunchtime, but we'll find the efficiency within the service to continue to deliver what we're committed to. And then I think that's where I stop. So again, at the end, happy to answer any questions. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, I do hope you found that update on both those services, which are primary essential services, as indeed all the other areas within the portfolio are also. I'd like to thank Kelly, I'd like to also thank Sarah, and obviously I thank Darren, and also just to make you aware that Jo Jahan is joining us virtually tonight on the screen because she has been sadly unwell. So we welcome Jo as well. I think it's important, as I say, to cover those items and to give you some background and exactly where we are going forward. The other items within the report, within your paperwork, I think all the details are there, but I think really this is all about your meeting, so I think really we should throw it open to all of yourselves to ask as many questions as the Chairman allows. Mr. Chairman.
Off we go. Councillor Deach first, then Councillor Morgan, Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you. Very interesting presentations. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of other members who are going to talk about the different aspects of the joint waste thing. I understand your challenges, really do. The area I want to touch upon, though, is communication with residents. I accept that their communication is good on the contaminated waste and all that sort of stuff. That's great. But when there are problems, like with the green waste situation, the communication is too slow. It's far too slow. Residents shouldn't be relying on me to update them. That's what you guys and your comms team ought to be doing. So, you know, the website needs to be updated far more quickly. It's not difficult to do. It's a 2-minute job with an update. The letters are going out too slow. So whatever letters you're sending out with updates, you know, residents are getting them a week or so after the fact. That's not good enough, okay? And I would like to see a push towards email communication wherever possible. Yeah, well, residents aren't getting it. And perhaps promote that service, that email updates, if that's what you're doing. I wasn't aware that service existed. So that's all I would say on joint waste solutions. On community services, that was fascinating. And there's a lot of services there that I'm sure residents aren't even aware of that exist. And I think that it's clear that the partnership between Surrey Heath and Runnymede is clearly working, and long may that continue. The only thing I would suggest is perhaps maybe we can look at other areas where partnership work could be affected, because it's clearly something as the way forward as far as I'm concerned. So thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Deach. Now, what we would do is get them to answer, because there could be different questions. So if they answer it, so if there's a repeat question, we can stop that. Yeah.
Thank you. Can I answer Councillor Deach's point?
Of course you can.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Deach. You're absolutely right. Yep, analyst leave. We got it wrong as regards the system being updated. There was a hacking incident during part of the year, which really did screw things up and slow things down. I've noted your comments and I take them on, and the email communication, that will certainly be pushed forward, is being currently pushed forward. We have good communication with people with the green waste, and I take that comment. As regards your community services, making, this will be music to somebody's ears, looking at other areas where we can do things, yeah, we're on it. We are really on, and I thank Darren, who's and all his team, because what we've done since we've actually had the partnership, we've transformed a whole lot of the areas, bringing, you know, and as we take it forward, we touched on the community transport to the hospitals and things like this, and stopping people from going back into hospital, and that's what it's all about. And there's so many things that we're tying one thing into the other. And it's an interesting point you said about people not being made aware of some of the services that are there. It's through that joint working partnership that we're able to push that forward through the GPs, through all the local CCG groups as well. So I thank and I note your points. Thank you, sir.
Councillor Mansell, it's Councillor Morgan now.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to rehash what Councillor Deach has said, but I think it's really important moving forward for the resumption of a monthly service that the communications is sorted out, because I think the problem with the previous time was there was no communication. People were, especially with the garden waste, they'd done all their gardening, so they had full bins, and then the suspension just happened to them. They weren't aware that there were the problems were as severe as they were. So I think it's really important that JWS is really upfront with residents going forward, and it's not to get people's hopes up, because if we're moving into spring, people may want to start gardening, and then if there's no service. But so just to add my weight to Councillor Deach's comments. One specific question: during the suspension of the garden waste services collection, a lot of people were asking about refunds, and I'm just wondering how many refunds for the garden waste service collection was actually handed out.
Can I just come back on you? Thank you for your points, Councillor Rice. Yes, the monthly comms, I take that point. Also, regards the garden waste being reintroduced in February, that is what we hope to plan. Life is changing. I will not reintroduce, and please don't listen to this minute, I will not reintroduce that garden waste till I'm absolutely sure that we can put a programme together to deliver to our residents. As regards the amount of people that have had a refund, can I come back to you that I'm quite happy to share it with the chairman, and I'll come back to you with that particular figure, because I think that should possibly something that I'm quite happy to come back to. Yeah, I'm just worried, Joe, about, there's certain things that I think we shall keep within the chamber and within the members, because obviously this can be a broadcast meeting. So I think if you're going to answer that question, if we can just stand back on that one, please.
Sorry, can I intervene here? I mean, it's a refund. I think it should be open.
It's the amount of people that have gone.
Not the amount of people, the principle behind refund, which I had raised a few times before, and we need to understand whether there would be a refund. And when I wrote in, there's a statement and a question to you. When I wrote in, they said, if you come out of the scheme, you may not get back, which I thought was rather silly. So I wrote back a very strong letter saying that can't be right, because the residents have paid £50, and you stop a service, and you can say if you come out, you can't go back. So having said that, some of them had, like Councillor Deitch and Councillor Morgan said, had requested, has that been done? If so, can they come back? Question one. Question two is, even today, for years worth of 50 quid, how many services did they get? How many collections did they get? Of the collections, are we getting a proportion back? Because I don't believe the residents have got the full service. It's a question, because I have a problem in principle. An organization like Amy should not be using the residents' money to fund their cash flow. That's my principle. Thank you very much.
I'm not sure I'd agree with necessarily that they're using it to fund their cash flow, but perhaps we can agree to disagree on that one. As regards to the issues about coming back into the scheme, I think the worry was that we don't know actually what and how things are going to be panned out in the future. So I think perhaps it was worded incorrectly, and I take that on. I believe there was an involvement with the Chief Executive on this as well. The point is that I didn't want to make a promise that we can't fulfil. The hope is that people, if they leave, they will be able to come back. But it's the unintended consequences of making promises that you can't achieve. But if I can possibly ask Jo to join, she may have a point as well, because I'd like your question answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mansfield. Officer?
Yes, thank you, and apologies I can't be there in person. A mute button's necessary with my cough still, I'm afraid. In terms of the process for extending subscriptions and refunds, what we hopefully have explained to most residents, but I appreciate if there's been misunderstandings, we'd hope to clarify those, that where collections have not taken place during the subscription year, then accounts would be extended to reflect those for each cycle of collections, and an additional fortnight's extension would be added to the end date of that particular account. The terms and conditions of the garden waste service don't normally allow for refunds, but obviously given the fact that the service can't be delivered, that has to be amended on a temporary basis. So where customers have not been satisfied with the extension to their subscription as a result of the suspensions, then some have requested and been given refunds, but those numbers are small. I was going to say I don't have numbers in front of me, so apologies for butting in there with my hand up on Zoom, Councillor Mansfield. but certainly, yeah, we can provide feedback on that. But the intention was to extend subscriptions rather than cancel accounts, but offer a refund where it was appropriate and requested. I hope that helps clarify.
Councillor Rice.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate that you may not have the figures to hand right now, but my question was relatively simple. I didn't want to know how much had been refunded or who had been refunded to. All I want to know is a number of how many refunds were given. I don't think that's going to threaten the commercial viability of Amy or JWS or the council. It's a number of refunds. I think it's really important that residents are fully aware of that they're entitled to, and I think I'm not really accepting the whole we don't really want to disclose it. If the numbers are low, that's good. It's good that people aren't leaving and people are taking the extension, but I think let's have a little bit of transparency here. If you don't have the numbers, send them to me, that's perfectly fine.
Thank you for that, Councillor Morgan. I think it's a fair request.
It is, Mr. Chairman, if I just intervene. Yeah, it's a very fair request, and I'll see that you'll get those numbers. And thank you to Jo also for her input. Thank you. I think it was Councillor Hawkins was next.
Councillor Hawkins, next.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks very much for the presentation. Flat collection food waste. You have in this chamber the head of planning, the relevant portfolio holder, the chairman and vice chairman of planning, and I think looking round, nearly every member here is a member of the planning committee or is a substitute of the planning committee, so it's quite relevant. Have you had pardon me, discussions with the planning team over what your requirements are and your ideal world for the collection of food waste in new developments?
I certainly haven't, and I'm just being totally honest with that. However, obviously, this is something that's being driven on a national basis. We are not the only authority that has the issue with how the food collections are made from flats and everything. This has always been an issue, and it is something we are currently working on. And there's more work to be done.
Of course, absolutely.
Thank you. Right, shall I put this? Can you please ensure that the current information that you have and requirements is fed through to the planning team so that it can, in turn, feed through to the planning committee? Because we're very keen on ensuring that waste is collected, but we haven't actually focused on food waste. Trust me, I'm sure, looking around, we will be doing so going forward. Thank you very much.
I'll give you that commitment. We will do that. Thank you.
Councillor Wheeler, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. A couple of points. I'm just going to very briefly touch. The wording around refunds was appalling. So to threaten residents with not being able to have access to a service again if they requested a refund was outrageous. And I will leave it there because I don't want to be accused of whatever it was, the phrase was right at the beginning that we said we would have. So I'll stop there. My next point is that the targets that we've got, we achieved 62.9% in 1920. We achieved 61.3% last year. We're forecasting 58% this year, and we're only looking to get back to 61% next year. Surely that is a very unambitious target. I don't think that we should be accepting that within this committee, and I think we should be questioning it, because what we're saying is we're not looking for any area of improvement to what we were achieving 3 years ago. That is simply not acceptable when it comes to recycling, particularly with our green agenda. That is just not acceptable. The other question that I have is how many drivers do you have today versus the number of drivers that the year 1920, please? What is...
They're all dead.
2019, 2020, thank you. Goodness me, I'm showing my age, aren't I? I'm aging well, I hope. But could we please know the difference in the number of drivers that you actually employ? Because I really hope that I am wrong and that there is a substantial deficit, but part of me has a horrible feeling that this is just another way, potentially, some may feel, of reinterpreting figures and profitability. So it'd be really nice to know what the difference is in your employment figures over, in fact, let's go over the 4 periods that we've got in this presentation. And if the portfolio holder, please, could come back on whether or not he genuinely feels not even getting back to where we were 4 years ago at the end of the next financial year is really an acceptable target that he's happy to put his name to.
I do. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Wheeler. I know they laughed at you, the slip you made. I mean, that definitely is a slip of your tongue.
Thank you, Councillor. First of all, I note your point about the wording of the refund, and I sort of note that comment. As regards the actual driver numbers, I'm going to refer to either Sarah or Joe, because we have weekly meetings on this. And if we could just add in the current figure, because it changes quite a lot as we're going on with the loss of drivers, etc. So it's the figures of the drivers that we actually have at the moment, and also the agency numbers we're using as of the last sort of period.
Actually, how different is it today?
Do,
No, it's there. Joe, please answer. You want to come in? Please do.
Apologies, I lost a bit of sound there, so I wasn't sure if I was being asked to speak or not. In terms of overall driver numbers, actually, since Amy took on the contract in February 2018, they've not made any changes to the number of rounds that operate in the borough. So the number of drivers required in Surrey Heath has not changed since Amy took over in 2018. They do have some round adjustment plans that they have brought to us, obviously with COVID, etc. Those were put on hold for a little while, but those aren't significant changes, and I think make a difference of one, but those have yet to be implemented. So no change in full-time driver requirements has been put in place by Amy since they took the contract on. I apologise because I've only got the total number in front of me today. So as of an update we received yesterday from Amy, there were 17 driver vacancies across the whole contract area. So that's all 4 districts and boroughs. And their agency cover meant that's only able to bring that down to 9. I think the difference between now and in previous years is the availability of agency staff. Whilst they might not have always had the full quota of drivers in full-time employment, the availability of agency staff has been able to plug those gaps more readily. And the current experience is the turnover of agency staff and the availability of agency staff is not where it has been in the past. And that's where the shortfall is coming from, in addition to the permanent recruitment issues that they've experienced.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wheeler, I'm sure you would want to come back on this one. If not, I would come back on it.
Feel free, Chair, to go ahead. It's basically, could we please have a graph of the average number of drivers, both substantive and agency or that you have used over the last 4 years in any given quarter, so maybe a quarter average over that period. So as I said, the response that some people may feel is that actually your numbers are not significantly lower than they were 4 years ago. It would be lovely to have the evidence to prove that wrong. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wheeler. What a statement you made, or maybe I misheard. You said Surrey Heath drivers haven't changed. The numbers of Surrey Heath hasn't changed. Am I right in saying that?
That's correct. In some of the other contract areas.
If that's correct, I just want to carry on. Then why are we suffering on a driver shortage? Are we all bundled into one big pot and we are being penalized for someone else's fault or some area's fault? I simply don't get that one. Thank you.
Apologies for jumping in too soon there. Sorry, the point I was trying to make was that since Amy have taken on the contract, their number of the requirement to staff all frontline rounds and street cleaning services with HGV drivers has not changed. The staffing requirement has remained the same. They've not made round changes, which we've seen in some of the other areas, which have either shifted the requirement for HGV drivers because they've been able to make efficiencies or change routing to reduce the requirement for drivers. There are vacancies in all 4 of the depots. As I say, I don't have the breakdown, unfortunately, here, but there are vacancies in all 4 depots. And the crucial service objectives that we've been trying to maintain is to keep those refuse recycling and food waste services running across all 4 areas, with the garden waste on rotation in recent months to get a collection, not frequently, unfortunately, but periodically for customers in each of the areas.
Thank you for your answer, but let me first address a question to the portfolio holder, or make a request. From what I hear, it seems Amy is using the entire forced to actually try and manage their balance. I mean, if Surrey Heath hasn't lost any drivers, so to speak, why are we being penalized? Maybe you can get a clear answer from Amy and give it back to us. I'm happy for the answer to come via an email. We'll appreciate that. Councillor Morgan first, and sorry. And
Thank
then
you.
Councillor...
My surname is Rise, Councillor Chair. You do know that.
I've known you for about 4 years
Yes,
now. My
but I
apologies.
think on this issue, I think we're confused over terminology, because what the officer is saying is that the requirement has not changed. So if we need 20 drivers for Surrey Heath, that requirement hasn't changed. But what Councillor Wheeler was asking for, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, is that how many employed drivers do we have? And so I'm suspecting that the actual number of employed drivers is much lower than it was 4 years ago. Not the amount of drivers we need, because that hasn't changed. It's actually the number of drivers we no longer have. I'm pretty sure that's what Councillor Wheeler was asking for. And that's really the information. We need just hard numbers, please.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, that was my interpretation as well. And I will get those hard numbers to you.
Councillor Black.
Similar question. I was just trying to understand what the workforce looks like.
Thank you.
Again, I'll get the numbers.
Beg your pardon, Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Councillor Mavagan. And the other very important bit was the comment on the somewhat unambitious targets for recycling, and whether or not, A, as a committee, we feel that that is acceptable, and secondly, whether or not the portfolio holder really wants to accept those targets within his portfolio.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. I'm inclined actually to agree with you. I think now that we have our new corporate strategic director for environment and community in place, I think it's something I'll be reviewing with him, and I take that point on board.
Very well handled, Councillor Mansfield. Pass the ball.
It's working as a team, Chairman. That's what we do.
Great stuff. Councillor Mansfield.
So if I can also just, within the portfolio, cover the other items, are you okay with for
yes,
that?
Please go ahead.
Obviously, thank you to the team once again, that I know that the Joint Waste Solutions team are quite anxious. They've come quite a long way, so they will be leaving us shortly. But the other areas are obviously the air quality report that is in your paperwork this evening, and also you have the climate change working group update within your paperwork this evening. And I'm quite happy if anyone has any questions, or if they want to email me after the meeting, should they have any questions, because there is a lot of 2021. Obviously, you have to take into account that there's been a number of reduced journeys on our roads, etc., which has an impact, and I'm quite happy to take questions on that. Somebody did ask me the other day about one of the questions. They asked me how many areas within Surrey Heath do we have these air monitor systems, and I actually did go back and just check. It's 51 locations.
Can we actually first have the question on the paper itself? Yes?
Fine.
Come back to you.
I'm just, if we're going to look at the air quality, I've got James Robinson as item 7.
Let's do that. Could Mr. Robinson come in and give us a short... Sorry, could Officer Robinson come in and give a short summary of the paper so that questions could be raised, if there are any?
Yes, good evening, Chair. Good evening, councillors. As you know, our monitoring network is designed to identify the areas with the highest levels of nitrogen dioxide at locations where the objectives apply. Most of the sites are therefore by residential properties close to the busiest roads and junctions. The results of the monitoring is thus not representative of typical or average conditions across the borough, but instead indicative of the worst case locations.
James,
Yes.
We're getting a little bit of distortion in the chamber because the volume is coming across too loud. If you go further away from your mouth, it might help. And just reduce the volume a little bit. Let's see how that goes.
Is that better?
I think so. A little bit better. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Perhaps it's because I'm shouting. Whilst the main source of nitrogen dioxide is road traffic, in general, 2020 showed an overall fall with 36 of the 37 monitored concentrations, recording lower values than 2019. As the councillor alluded, the network has now been expanded to 51 locations in response to local concerns around schools and areas of concern identified by related air quality studies. Of those new sites introduced, none were close to either the annual or hourly mean objectives. Annual mean concentrations at the 2 diffusion monitoring locations, both at Wood Road, that were above the objective during 2018 and 2019, have recorded considerable falls in concentration since and are now fully compliant. These are likely to have benefited in part from improvements to the M3 and the cessation of building work in the immediate vicinity. As regards dust, the 2020 results indicate that concentrations remain well within the relevant air quality objectives. The results are consistent with those of the last 5 years and indicate that exceedances in the future are very unlikely. The trend over 12 years is flat and provides further evidence that despite the dramatic falls in road traffic volume, dust levels remain stable, and hence this is not the principal source of this pollutant in the borough. As regards fine dust, known as PM2.5, because PM10 levels are around 16, it is inferred that the lower PM2.5 concentrations are likely to be well below the guidance level of 25. In respect of the motorway, both nitrogen dioxide and dust are measured continually at Castle Road, and additionally nitrogen dioxide at representative locations where people live close to it. Comparing levels pre-SMART in 2013, the widening of the motorway, with those in 2020 indicate a 29% fall in levels. In conclusion then, exceedance of the relevant dust and NO2 objectives, either short or long term, are unlikely at any residential locations, and the current trend in 2021 remains downward. We have met and continue to do so all statutory air quality objectives across the borough. The decrease in concentrations during 2020 are encouraging signs that we are seeing improved air quality. However, of course, this must be caveated with the fact that unless there has been a sea change in the way people work, the pandemic and the associated lockdown restrictions will have accounted for a large proportion of the annual mean reductions seen both this and last year. Only a year without any lockdowns or home working advice will determine if this has been the case. And that concludes my summary of the report, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Officer. I think I'll go to Councillor Deitch first, Councillor Wheeler, Councillor Morgan. Beg your pardon, Councillor Rice again. Can you move your name, please?
Thank you. My area of interest is the A331 Blackwater Valley Road. I know this issue came to the local area committee, and regrettably we were unable to get speed cameras on the A331 to enforce the reduction in speed limit. To be honest with you, I don't know what these figures mean. 1 UG/M3 means absolutely nothing to me. Can you give me an indication of whether the reduction is, or the measures I should say, is doing well? It says a 1 UG/M3 reduction. Is that good? Is it bad? because I think that air quality, particularly to residents along Mitchett Road, Colford Bridge Road and so on, that are very close to the A331 there, do actually have concerns around that. So I'd be interested to hear what your comments are on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deach. I'm sure that James will be able to go into a lot more depth. I would tend to look at it from the point of view that the reduction that we've seen in these various reviews, that the air quality reviews, any reduction I think is a welcome reduction. But James, I'm sure you'd like to add some of your professional knowledge on this.
Yes, of course, the measures culminated in the imposition of a 50-mile-an-hour limit. And it was modelled, as these things tend to get, that would have the desired reduction to bring the level along that Blackwater Valley footpath to beneath the objective, which remains at 40. Now, preliminary results indicate that has been the case. The scheme is due to run until 2024, and it's not until that final reporting period will we know whether the government accepts that has been successful or not. But yes, early indications are that it has. As regards your residents in Mitchett Road, etc., they are so far away from that road that they are only minimally affected by nitrogen dioxide levels from it. We have had monitoring locations in Mitchett Road along the path, and they've been well within the statutory objective.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robinson. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. I'm so pleased that you mentioned that it may in part be due to a lockdown and no one being able to go anywhere. I happen to live in the middle of Chopham Village, not close enough directly to the M3. I would assume to be directly affected by it, close enough on a not too windy day to be able to hear it. And I had a blissful time during the lockdown when my front door was not covered in dust and pollution, black pollution, basically, from living in the middle of the village. However, it very rapidly was again. And I would have thought that one of the very simple metrics that we could do here to see whether or not we are doing well is, I'm sure that the Highways Agency must have the average traffic for the M3 on a month-by-month basis, and to do a comparison of that against the comparison of the drop in pollution would probably give us a slightly more realistic figure as to how well we're doing. So I wonder if maybe that is something, doesn't look like a particularly complicated piece of analysis, but maybe that's a piece of analysis that could be undertaken. The other thing as well is, I may be looking at the wrong document, but I'm relying on the Surrey Heath Borough Council website for the information. It would appear as though the last air quality action plan for Surrey Heath was written in 2005. I'm sure that can't be the same, the case. But if that is the case, maybe it's time for an update, or alternatively, maybe it's time for our website to be updated if we do have a slightly more up-to-date plan. It was written by you in 2005, I believe, James. So it's nice to know that we've got good continuity of employment at Surrey Heath, but maybe it's time for a slight review. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. I mean, I agree with you on the update that I think we should do. And the question on, I don't know how relative it is, but question of number of cars and pollution.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Wheeler, and I'm sure that we will be looking at the updating to the website, whether the dates are correct. I'm sure James will be looking into that. As regards your wider question on the analysis, we are dependent, obviously, on, and being a former county councillor as well, with regards to the situation with the M3, we are reliant on that information from the highways. That's the national highways, not just our local highways team. And I don't need to talk to you or lecture you about the issues of the M3 and junctions, who owns what bit of flipping land and what they're prepared to do about it. But that is a very good point, and that's something we could possibly seek that information from them, however long it may take, because I think that would be a very interesting figure to know. And it's interesting to your comments also about your front door, knowing your front door quite well and its placement as to the changes. Thank you.
I would be careful
Thank
with
you.
what you say here. I mean, having said that, thank you very much for the answer. Let's try and keep the questions and answer
Councillor
brief,
Rice.
brief as possible. I do see Councillor Rice now.
Thank you.
Can you move your number plate that way,
Chairman,
please?
you've known me for a few years now. I would hope that you'd know my surname. It's quite easy. It's only 4 letters. I've got a couple of comments regarding this. And firstly, my real concern is on the presentation of the maps of the borough regarding the locations of the monitoring locations. Yes, it shows the monitoring locations, but it only shows the parts of the borough where that is. I think it's doing a disservice to members that we don't actually see a whole picture of the entire borough of where the monitoring posts are. In my own ward, I'm actually very concerned that we don't actually have a monitoring station in Mitchett. I think Mitchett Road, Colford Bridge Road are 2 highly used cut-throughs from the A331 through to Ash going towards that location. So I think it's really important that I think, and obviously I have spoken with Mr. Robertson and Mrs. Liverson regarding this last year. At the end of last year, I did raise it with them. So I would like Councillor Mansfield to review this regarding the levels of pollution, regarding regarding the Farnborough Airport, but now that I've learned that we don't have a monitoring station in Mitchett, I think that's a real problem. And even looking at the maps, Mitchett is not even included on the map. I think it's presenting a very skewed image of how we're monitoring air quality. So if Councillor Mansfield could have asked the team to take a look at this and potentially bring a monitoring station back into Mitchett.
Thank you for that. I'm going to stress, keep the questions straight. If you want to make a statement, please be brief. I mean, it's already 20 minutes past 8, and we haven't even gone past
Chairman,
that.
sorry, it's not our fault that there are 10 items on this agenda.
Hold on. I am addressing that on its own, but that's an item. I do appreciate that we have a problem, not with you folks asking questions. I'm happy to stay here till 10, but it seems, there you go. That's where the problem is. So hold on. No. Let me finish. Let me make the statement. I have already addressed this problem on the length of the agenda. Unfortunately, that's what we have. If I can't finish by 10 o'clock, this will be carried into the next meeting or a new meeting or whatever it is. I have already spoken to the Democratic Services. I will speak to the Chief Executive because this agenda has become far too long now. And it's about, 400, 500 pages of printout. Thank you. That's a statement, not a question.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, can I just reply to Councillor Rice? Councillor Rice, thank you for your point, and I'll give the commitment that we will look at the picture that's on the website and see that there's a better definition of the actual locations, and I'll see that you're actually, or your chairman actually has a breakdown of where these locations are currently, and as regards reviewing the opportunity for Mitchett, I'll see why that's never been taken forward. Thank you.
Councillor Galliford.
Thank you. I will keep it brief. Most of the points I wanted to make have already been made. Thank you, James, for a very comprehensive report, as always. It's really good to know that we're not going to choke to death on the way home. However, as I've stated elsewhere, I am disappointed that we cannot exceed the directives handed down by the government, who, in my humble opinion's handling of COP26 was nothing short of a dereliction of duty. I think there's lots more that we could be doing. Some of this report also speaks of less monitoring, and yet we admit that a lot of the reductions are due to lockdown. Also, although we have 51 sites, I'd like to ask, how do we communicate this to residents? Because the questions that I get, I can only assume that none of our residents have any idea that we have so many monitors in the borough. Thank you.
Very valid point. Thank you for that, Councillor Galliford.
In reply to the point that you made earlier about the COP22, I'm not even going to go there. That's obviously a personal view. As regards sharing the information, then it's something that we will probably refer to the reply to Councillor Rise, that I think that if there is that lack of information on the website, then we'll put it right.
Thank you very much, and we'll make a note of it to make sure it's done for the next. Whenever it's updated, we'll keep this committee updated. Thank you very much. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I direct my question to James, please? On page 42, you mentioned that the strip from Frimley Road, Camberley to the Ravenswood, embracing the houses, exceeds the level of exceedance is 20 times. But when I then look at SH44 and SH45, and I've tried to track this through on the website, and I was completely confused and lost. My technical expertise is not going anywhere near there. I haven't got any figures. Can I, at some stage, because I get a lot of questions about the traffic queuing at that Frimley Park roundabout, coming into the Chobham Road, the whole area there, at some stage, not tonight, I understand, but at some stage, can I have some information on the two monitoring stations, SH44 and SH45, that are by the Grove School and by the hospital entrance? There is one I noticed on Frimley Park Hospital. I'm not quite sure what that's achieving, but be as it may. But at some stage, can I have that information? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah, we'll get that to you.
Very clearly, Councillor Mansfield, I think what your portfolio and your officers need to do is try and get this information on a platform which is easily accessible for the councillors and residents, so it doesn't become a major issue every time we meet. I mean, I've heard this before, so I'm repeating it again. I think we have to make it public now. So this report is there in the public domain. It's important we have a special feature in our website or somewhere on our website detailing all these monitoring reports, monitoring places, etc., etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Noted.
Thank you. Any other questions on this point? Great. I'm not too sure I want to take it from. Thank you. Thank you. It is a long day, I promise you, already. So, item 8, Climate Change Working Group update. Councillor, Councillor, where is
Mr. Chairman, the item 8 is going to be covered by Anna Goldman.
Thank you. Officer.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much. This report provides an update on the Climate Change Action Plan following the declaration of an emergency in October 2019. The action plan was developed by the Planning and Policy Conservation Team and in conjunction with the Climate Change Working Group. So the action plan includes a total of 65 actions. They cross 6 key themes. So that's energy, transport, environment, behaviour change, operations and monitoring. And the action plan has 2 key aims. The first is to work towards our ambitious net zero target by 2030 as an organisation, and also to contribute to making the borough net zero by 2050. And that's with an aspiration for net zero as fast as we can for the borough towards that 2030 target as we have as an organisation. It's also to ensure that the council is resilient to the impacts of climate change and supports the wider resilience of the borough. And in addition, it's important to mention, reflecting the 5-year strategy, that the delivery of the Climate Change Action Plan aims to achieve a 70% reduction in our organisational carbon emissions by the end of the 5-year strategy period. So the report provides an update on the progress of these actions, and a committee is asked to note and make any observations that we'll be able to respond to. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Before I hand it over, normally I let the committee members speak first. I have a fundamental problem and a flaw I see a flaw in this report. It's great to have these pages, all colored, etc. What it doesn't have is the dates as to when it would be achieved, or if it's been achieved, the date. I would personally like to see another column with a date on it. We do have the chairman of the climate change here and the vice chair here. So maybe you can take it and have a conversation with the portfolio holder, because I already have had a conversation with the vice chair on this. I think it's important we have some dates when it's achieved or when it will be achieved. Otherwise, it's pointless bringing this. We can't scrutinize it any further than take statements on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a fair point. And I attend the Climate Change Working Group with Councillor Rise is chairing that meeting, and also Councillor Galliford, and so I take those comments on board.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Councillor Wright, sorry, I got your name right.
Thank you very much. In response to your question regarding the dates, I take it on board. Obviously, we have, in terms of the plan, it's been categorised into to low, medium, and high priority. So obviously, the high priorities are things that we are achieving almost immediately, and then there are dates within the report. It's a long report. I do appreciate that, but I can take that on board. With regards to the Climate Change Working Group more generally, this is going to be a statement, and I'm taking the privilege as chair to be quick. I just want to thank officers for their support on this, and I want to thank all the members of the working group. It's an incredibly collaborative working group where we are all working together. I think there's been a high level of compromise in terms of and a reality of what we can achieve as a council and what we can aspire to for a borough as well. I want to thank Councillor Galliford for the work that she's been doing and leading this as well. She's been excellent, as well as Councillor Hawkins and Councillor Alloway as members of this committee as well. I think the work they have contributed has been incredible. Yes, I think, as Dr. Goldman said, we have a 65-point plan, which is very ambitious, and we've already started achieving. We've already started to have achieved, and it's covering a whole host of areas. It's not just how do we change the energy supplier, but it's looking much more deeper at the training aspects of what we do for the council and officers, and how we look at our fleets and how we look at the partners that the council partners with as well. So it's very wide-ranging, and I'm looking forward to continuing the work. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Rice. Councillor Galliford.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Anna for the report and all the team for the work that's gone into it, reiterating, as Councillor Rice said, in creating this strategy, which could, if implemented in full, make us the real flagship across the whole of Surrey, which is something that I certainly would like to see. However, my comment here is, or possibly question, is to full council, really. We only have £45,000 in order to achieve this. And while some of the aims and ambitions, we may get grants for, we cannot guarantee that those grants will be available. And we even have even a less guarantee that we would actually be successful if we did apply for them. We have declared 2.25 years ago, as Anna says, a climate emergency, and just a month or so ago, a biodiversity emergency. The word emergency means something, allegedly. So, we need to have the ability to put these actions into action. I really think that we need to consider the ramifications if we don't look up, for those of you who have seen that film. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Galliford. I take on board what you're saying. I think my direction of route would be that something that, as the committee, you could put forward for something to possibly come to the executive in the future for the full council for deliberation. That's something I can work with you on in direction with regards to your point. Just before I finish, so I hope that's acceptable to you. But I would just like to, from a point of etiquette, I would just like to apologise personally to Anna Goldman because Councillor Rise referred to her as doctor. I didn't when I introduced her this evening. And I didn't, Councillor Anna, I didn't refer to you with your title because on the paper it just has your name. But I do apologise if I have missed out your title. Just that Councillor Rise mentioned it, and I didn't want to feel that I hadn't acknowledged that. Thank you.
I think she has forgiven you, Councillor Mansfield. Councillor Deach, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, my colleague, Councillor Hawkins, always speaks very highly within our group of the work of your working group, Morgan, and your stewardship of it. And I regret that I've never been able to get to a meeting. But you know, I've spoken to you recently on I'd like to play a more active part in that. I read this report with interest, and actually I was quite shocked actually at how much work has been done. I wasn't aware of it, to be honest, to my shame as well. One thing though that I think, and it's something I'll bring up when I come to a meeting, that I think that we ought to try harder on is to make things easier for residents to do these things. I've recently made the very bold move to get rid of my car and purchase an e-bike. Don't know whether I've done the right thing as that it's off the road at the moment, but anyway, that's another story. I think, though, that what this council could possibly do is make more facilities available so that residents, because these bikes are bloody expensive. My bikes cost over £2,000, and I wouldn't be willing to padlock it to a pole in the high street. So and I think what we're actually going to see is a proliferation of these e-bikes in the community. Believe me, in the next 2, 3, up to 5 years, almost everyone's going to have them. And I think that we need to make better facilities available to store these things. And we, as an owner of a large part of the town centre, we're in a unique position to do that. And I think we should be doing it in advance of the proliferation rather than waiting for it to happen and then catching up, if you see what I mean. I also think that would, in turn, would actually support the businesses and the economic development and viability of the town centre and for the villages as well, if we do the same thing there. So I was just hoping that we can try and have more focus on enablement, let's say, of these things. And I think we'll see it happen a lot quicker if we do. Thank you.
Councillor Deach, you make a very valid point. I'll let you say that because it's very important it be said today. Sorry, Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah. Sorry, Chairman, thank you very much. I believe there is a secure bike store in town centre. Now, there is one there, actually, on... was it Princess? No, which one is it on? It's on one of the roads anyway. Where's him? My question was to Councillor Mansfield. There's an awful lot of joint working with here. Can you ask how much input are you getting from the cabinet holder at county on this?
Please.
The true answer, please.
Oh, you're going to get that. My first question is, who is it? I wouldn't go any further.
That's the answer I wanted, actually. It is something I will take up on behalf of the Climate Change Working Group.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Hawkins. I mean, like everyone, sorry, let me finish. I want to say something on this. I have been through this report like everyone else with interest because climate change is close to everyone's heart. And the thing I found that, one, the data wasn't there. Two, very important, lots of SCCs here, like Councillor Hawkins said, and I put question marks. Yeah, we are reliant on a third party in this instance, and if they don't perform, we are going to fall behind. Most important, my third point, which has been raised by Councillor Galliford, is it will require additional funding. It will require potentially additional funding, so on and so on and so on. Yeah? If you are going to meet this target in any shape or form, we must have a budget. It so happened we got Section 151 officer here today. Yeah, I would strongly suggest you and the possibly Nick and Bob get together and work out a budget for this. Because if the budget is not there, this whole project is off, or it'll go off the rails. So it is absolutely essential you get numbers into this. That's my sincere advice to you.
Thank you. I take that on board. I only refer to the reply I gave earlier, which is basically that it's something we will be looking at full council. And I appreciate what you said, but it's the reply I gave earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mansfield. Councillor Rice and then Councillor Galliford.
Thank you very much. I think Councillor Deitch makes a very good point regarding storage, and I think with the car parking strategy that's been deferred and now coming back, I think the executive should actually take a look at the actual car parking assets that we actually own throughout the entire borough, and how do we use those? What's been discussed in the climate change working group is actually using the car parks currently for electric vehicle charging points. So if we have e-bikes, which I agree with Councillor Deitch, people are going to be buying them more and more, we should be looking to that. So it's actually, for example, myself, I live in a flat, I've got almost 3 stories to walk up. I'm not going to be able to lug an e-bike up there. I need somewhere that's safe to secure it. We have to look much wider at the estate that Surrey Heath owns and be much more innovative. And I did hear Councillor Page say, what money tree? I mean, that's the problem with the budget. We have to prioritise what do we prioritise? And that's a political decision that we have to make. And it's important that we have this conversation to actually say, we need X amount of money for the climate change agenda. How do we find it?
Thank you for that, Councillor Rice. Councillor Galliford.
Agree with everything that's been said. Thank you, Councillor Mansfield, for agreeing to look at the budget as well. It's not just about individuals, though. It's also written within the plan that we will try and assist companies and businesses in the area, because that also is something that needs to be done. I think we also are looking at procurement as well. So there are so many ways this ripples out. But again, yes, it will come down to budget. Thank you.
Councillor Wheeler.
It's very quick. But when it comes to climate change, not having our garden waste collected leads to an awful lot more bonfires, which is not good at all for the climate, as we all know. Joined up thinking, pressure on our partners.
My final point on this, if there are no more questions, I want to make one more final point on this. From the conversation we had so far, portfolio holder, Councillor Mansfield, it seems this is a very important item for the council. From a scrutiny point of view, what we are saying is you need to have more money, and if that's a task. Secondly, you need to work with SAC if you can find the right portfolio holder. Thirdly, if this were to be implemented properly, I think you may need a couple of more officers or one more officer to make it happen. I don't know how many members there are in this team, but it's an important team to have. So kindly take that on board and speak to the officers and hopefully come back to us with your final answer or your findings. Thank you. Item 9, Local Plan Authority Monitoring Report, Council Performance, under the heading Council Performance. And I don't know who's taking that. Councillor, Mr. Chinaya.
Thank you, Chair. It's myself doing this presentation tonight. So good evening, councillors. Item 9 on the agenda pack relates to the Surrey Heath Local Plan Authority Monitoring Report, known as the AMR. So this report has been produced in accordance with the Localism Act of 2011. This AMR monitors the period between the 1st of April 2020 to the 31st of March 2021. The current core strategy was adopted in 2012 and covers the duration from 2011 to 2028. Therefore, many of the objectives are designed to be achieved over the duration of the plan period. Therefore, a single year's monitoring should not be taken in isolation, as this does not give a true picture of the plan itself. I will now highlight the main findings in the AMR. The current core strategy sets out a target to build 3,240 homes between 2011 and 2028. This equates to 191 units per year. From April 2011 to March 2021, the Council has delivered 2,564 homes, which exceeds the analysed target. However, in 2018, the government introduced a new method of calculating the housing need, which was Surrey Heath is 327. In the monitoring year, there were 352 dwellings exceeding the methodology by 25 units. Production of new homes rely on provision of SANGs, and the Council works on delivering SANG land. New SANG capacity will enable further housing to be delivered over the corresponding plan period. During the monitoring period, 11.1% of completed dwellings were affordable. This is a significant reduction from the previous year. It's important to note that a significant proportion of applications came through as prior approvals for conversion from change of use from offices to residential. Such applications do not secure affordable housing. Affordable housing is further impacted by viability constraints. The Council have ensured that the environmental protections are met, in particular, waste sent to reuse and recycling. In terms of employment floor space, there has been a net gain during the plan period. However, there have been a net loss of employment and retail floor space, and this has been partly due to the downturn in economic changes in the borough. The majority of retail floor space has been completed in town and district and local centres. There have been no net loss of community spaces. This concludes my main findings from the report. The recommendation to PNF is to note the publication of the AMR. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. This should be an interesting topic. Questions? Surprise, no questions. Wow. Well, that's a surprise. Thank you for the report. It's a detailed report. I must confess, I did struggle reading through the whole thing. But thank you for that anyway. It is a bit confusing. We got an annual report, annual plan, 5-year plan, and this is 2011 to 28 local plan comes through. So anyway, thank you very much. I hope everyone's got their head around these plans.
Can I just think...
annual plan portfolio holder is here. Are you happy with this report, sir?
I think it's an excellent report. Thank you very much, Chair, for letting me congratulate Gavin Shania and the report writer, Kieran, for an excellent report. Thank you, guys.
That was a big escape. That was a quick done. Councillor Hawkins.
Right, you're desperately trying to generate something, so I'm. So I will say that I have to echo the words of Councillor Rise in when he said in the Climate Change Working Group that it's a very collegiate working group, and the same is true for the Local Plan Working Group. I mean, quite frankly, the volume of papers the guys and girls in that team produce, the quality of the papers, month after month, and I say that because we have a massive pile. Those of us on the Local Plan Working Group have an enormous pile of stuff we have to read before the next meeting, and I am working my way through honest gov. I just record my thanks for the work that they put in. I know you're doing your best to generate something, and that's as much as I can come up with. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. At least we had one question on the biggest part of the agenda. Oh,
Sorry, the question was, do you agree? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Galliford, go for it.
I'll just throw one in. Just looking at SANGs and everything, I'm just wondering how much do we spend on SANGs?
I don't have that figure to hand. I'm not sure if Kieran is able to assist. He's on the call, on the Zoom call.
Yes, I'm able to assist. So in terms of SANGs, all the payments we receive through from developer contributions to SANGs in a given year are the contributions we receive. There were no payments made directly by the council on any purchases in the monitoring year.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. I may just as well ask the question here. I have actually put in a request for information through internally. Kieran, I doubt very much if it's at your fingertips, but I wonder what proportion of the costs that are attributed to the purchasing and the running costs of SANGs are actually earmarked to cover the cost of the parking that is associated with the different SANGs across the borough.
I don't have any specific figures to hand, but I have passed on your query to the Green Spaces team who may be able to assist.
Maybe if those figures could come back through this group as well.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler, and thank you, Officer Kieran. I have one observation on this in this report. I know on page 232, we talk about the town centre area action plan, etc., etc. I don't know how the committee or the officer is going to handle this because it's going to be discussed, I believe, potentially at the exec and potentially later on in the full council. I'm not too sure. I don't know whether the CEO has a say in this matter, but it's up here. It's in here. So from pages 232 to 236, because it is all to do with the town centre itself, and it's been presented. So you need to say something about it now, or do you want to defer it? It's entirely up to you. I give you the freedom.
Chairman, thank you. So there is a piece of work underway in the work programme for this year, which is the development of a new town centre strategy. And that work is being overseen by the town centre working group, cross-party working group. And that's where the output of that work will go in the first instance. And I think subject to discussions with members, it will then come forward. I don't know if that's the same town centre strategy that's being referred to in this document, because I appreciate the planning team will have done a lot of spatial strategy work before I arrived in the council, and I don't know whether it's referring to that historic work. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, David. That is basically a historic document they're referring to in this AMR. That's correct.
This refers to historic stuff.
Correct.
I thought as much, but
Yes.
I just want a clarification because we are looking at something that's historic. Another thing I have on this one, Mr. Chinna, is that, you know, in the town centre itself, lots of previous office buildings have been converted into flats. So that, I don't know whether this report takes into account the fact that it has an impact on the employment numbers you're talking about, yes, and the floor space. So am I to disregard the current work that has gone on it because this is a historic document?
That's correct, yeah. I mean, in terms of loss of employment floor space, I mean, obviously that has impacted in terms of the current year, in terms of the amount of employment floor space in the borough, because a lot of the office space has been converted from office to residential, so that's impacted on the amount of floor space which is available in the borough going forwards. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. Chinna. Appreciate your help on it. Okay, nothing else. No other questions. Let's go on, move on to agenda 9.
Councillor Galliford.
Sorry, Councillor Galliford.
Just briefly, my memory may not serve me right, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but I believe we used to pay Bracknell Forest to provide sands for us. Is that still something that we do?
Yes, you're correct. You're correct. We pay for sands in the past.
We are currently working with Bracknell Forest at the moment in terms of providing further sand capacity. That is correct, yes, at the moment.
Am I right in, just a clarification sake, am I right in saying that it's an annual payment? Or was it a one-off payment?
I would need to take that away, Chair, on that point in terms of the payments of money.
Okay. Could I ask Section 151 officer also to have a look at that for me, please? Thank you.
I am able to answer that question now, if that would be helpful.
Yes, please go ahead.
So we make a quarterly payment to Bracknell Forest Council dependent on any monies we receive through for applications allocated to Shepherd's Meadow Sands. So if a payment is made in a given quarter, then we would pay it over to Bracknell Forest. However, if an application doesn't make payment within that quarter, then there's a nil payment for that quarter. So it's done on a quarterly basis, but there's not always a payment made. It depends on what's coming through from developer contributions.
Okay, can I have a follow-up on that one? Is it the only SANG payment the council are paying, or are there other SANG payments we are making?
Other ones would include Hawley Meadows Sang, which goes to Hart, and there's a smaller sang called Swan Lakes. However, we no longer allocate any further capacity because that's full. So the only other sang that we currently would contribute money towards is Hawley Meadows, but that would be on the same basis as the Shepherd's Meadows payments for Bracknell.
Thank you very much, because I have read it somewhere, and thank you. I thank Councillor Galliford for bringing this up and reminding me of these payments, because it is cash out of this council. So do we know the quantum on this? I'm sure Section 151 officer may not be able to do that because he's relatively new. Kieran, do you know the amount of money we are paying out to these SANGs?
It's information we could provide through looking back at the quarterly reports. What I would note is it's not money that's coming from the council, it's money that's coming from developers. So we facilitate the payments, but it's not money that the council is specifically paying. It's from direct developer contributions.
Okay, so it's covered by someone else paying us. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah, okay. Exactly.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Sorry, Councillor Rice, rather. Rees.
One day you will get it right, Chairman. I think what this actually does is just highlights the absolute lack of SANG provision we actually have in the rest of the borough. Yeah. That's the real issue facing us. It's not the payment to Bracknell Forest, because we don't see that money. It's the fact that the rest of the borough is developed to breaking point, and that's the question for the local plan now, that we actually have to start looking seriously at where else we can develop, because the rest of the borough, Mindenhurst is really the last area of the borough, of the rest of the borough, that we can really develop fully now. And that's the issue that we're going to, because going forward, we're going to have to start looking to other councils.
You make a valid point. I think the local plan people have to take this on board. Councillor Page, if you make a note of it for you to think about it when you prepare your local plan. Thank you. Okay. Anything else on this subject? That's it. Done. Where are we now? 10. Draft annual plan 22-23. Mrs. Livingston, you're on at last.
Thank you, Chair. So, committee, just bringing forward to you the draft annual plan for 22-23. This has been put together, obviously, directly from the 5-year strategy that was agreed in October 2021. Also, it's been in consultation with the executive portfolio holders and all of the officers in the different areas to bring forward to you, as I say, the first draft of the annual plan for 22-23. Obviously, this is the vehicle that we use to deliver the 5-year strategy. I'm really coming forward now, and as I say, we've set it out in the new setup with the environment, health and quality of life, economy, effective and responsive council. So it's in those new 4 areas as the 5-year strategy is set up, because we want to demonstrate how we're now delivering that 5-year strategy, which is when we went out to public consultation to the community and got their feedback. There are a couple of things, as I say, this is still at draft format, so we really would like the committee's responses, so we can feed that in to obviously the annual plan, which will then is programmed to go to the executive in March of this year for final agreement. So I ask for your questions and comments, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Livingston. Questions and comments? Councillor Leach.
Just very simply, are you on target to get that to the executive? And you say it's in the programme, but are you on target to deliver that ready to present to executive?
Yes, that's absolutely. Obviously, also just add, we're also working obviously with finance as well to make sure that obviously our annual plan is also budgeted for as well. So yeah, we are on target. I was just going to say, Chair, if there aren't any comments now and councillors want to obviously bring anything forward to me, they can always contact me and make sure that there's any comments, because at the end of the day, this is in draft at the moment until we finally publish it will probably be early March.
Just to hope to see that the household waste recycling and compost target...
Sorry, can't hear you. You need to take them off.
I'll take it off then. Okay, just to say that I hope that the proposed target for 22-23 for recycling will be adjusted upwards in terms of the percentage being recycling, following the earlier comments in relation to the lack of ambition of target.
You need to press your button, please.
Sorry, and joint waste to make sure that we've actually got that looked at and agreed for 22-23.
Any other observations, comments? Councillor Galliford.
It's just a question that I'll probably bring to you outside of here anyway, but I'm just wondering what the car park and improvement works at Turf Hill might be, considering we are due to have ESSO plough through the area pretty soon. Thank you.
I don't have an answer to that, but I will get a specific answer for you, and I will come back to you, Councillor Galliford. So yeah, absolutely.
Super. Thank you so much, Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't know, it's a fair point or not, but we've got the proposed targets for 22-23, and I appreciate the document this is going in, but some of these targets are interesting, but they don't tell me an awful lot, because they don't actually say what we are now and what the journey of travel is. And that may be, I think that's in another document, but I mean, it would be quite helpful to have another comment. I mean, just looking at, you know, an arbitrary one, percentage of streets falling below grade B cleaning standards, target for 22-23, but what is it now? You know, it then just gives us an indication of how we're performing. Thank you.
Mrs. Livingston.
Yeah, obviously we have the current annual plan that obviously we can make sure that we compare that to, so you've got that full picture. But yeah, no, I can take that on board, and obviously when we're reporting things, we can make sure that we're giving you a comparison. Is that what you're asking for, Councillor?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if I can say something to the officers in general, this is a problem I've had in the past as well. We have produced numbers where we can compare it to the previous years or a budget figure. So it's just a number for the sake of number being thrown in. And Councillor Hawkins makes a very valid point. What are we comparing? Are we comparing a bad run or a good run? We have no idea. Fundamentally, if you have producing a plan, we are hoping to improve our performance. That's the plan, I presume.
Chair, I take that point on board. So in other words, trying to show the comparison. So we're not just presenting, obviously what's happening for 22-23. It's comparing and how that's changing to what we've done previously to show that we're stretching. So yeah, I take that on board.
That's a very valid point. Sorry, Councillor Wheeler, did you want to come back on something?
Yes, please, thank you. I'm afraid it's my age-old beef. We've done huge amounts in terms of organising and liaising with the partners that impact Chobham in particular and West End, I believe, as well, in terms of the strategic health partner. The provider of our services are not Surrey Heath ICS. We sit within a different Surrey, and I see again no reference to that in terms of the partnership around getting people out of hospitals, getting people out of Ashford and St Peters is just as important to the residents that I represent as getting them out of Frimley Health. So yet again, I'm sorry to mention it again, I will continue to mention it until it is incorporated into every single document that talks about our partners, but can that please be addressed in this report? And the other one is in relation to poverty. Chobham seems to be missed out of that. I think we're all well aware of the larger percentage of people that live with very restricted means within Chobham and the amount of social housing. We've got Frimley, we've got Mitchett, we've got areas that I think are less impoverished and have less social housing, but we're missed out of that bit as well, if that could be looked at, please.
Just to confirm, Chair, I can say just to confirm, Chair, yeah, absolutely, Councillor Wheeler, I'll take those points on board.
Thank you, Mrs. Livingston. No other questions, comments? Mrs. Livingston? Sorry, Councillor Mansfield.
No, it's nothing to do with the point being raised. I was just going to ask if I can be able to leave the meeting now.
You are excused, Councillor Mansfield. I could see it in your eyes. You need a rest now.
I need to lay down.
Thank you for attending. Appreciate it. Councillor, Mrs. Livingston, thank you very much for your report. Excellent work. I request of all officers, if you are producing numbers, give us comparisons. Numbers for the sake of a number doesn't work. I've been in the council for 2 years. I've been asking this over and over again. Thank you.
Duly noted.
Right, moving on. Corporate Risk Register. Section 151 officer, it's yours, no?
Indeed, thank you very much, Chairman. This is the annual report on the corporate risk register that comes to the this committee. The report highlights the high-level risks in the council, and in this current report we have 8 high-level risks that we've shown in there. And I think if you look at who owns those risks, it is all shared amongst the very senior officers of the council. So it is something the council takes very seriously, and the ownership of those risks. The report is also taken, or the risk register is taken and reviewed by the corporate management team twice a year, and there's a risk management group which I chair as the senior information risk officer in the council, and that goes on a quarterly basis. Other than that, happy to take questions.
Questions? None whatsoever. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Councillor. It is a quick one. I don't mean to make my fellow councillors groan. It is point 2 on the risk register. The council has embarked...
could you speak up, please?
Sorry, it is part... Gosh, that's unusual for me. The council has embarked on a property management strategy to generate income from other sources. I just wondered, please, from your point of view, when we embarked originally on that strategy, if you could clarify, please.
I believe, and please, I'm not coming here from a position of being new in the council, that we took on that strategy around it probably about 3 or 4 years ago, when we started some of the investment policies, but I will stand corrected. It's my assumption.
Sorry, I'm just trying to find my report now. My apologies. If we have a strategy, or you're referring to, these are all, what you're referring to again is historical stuff, correct? It is. Yeah. I mean, I know what new strategy is. I belong to that particular working group, so this is purely historical stuff. Yes. And I know what the new strategy is. Sorry, Councillor Wheeler.
If I could come back, I just would like to know from your understanding, and I apologise because I appreciate that you're new, would you say that the purchase of Camberley Town Centre actually contributed part of the origin of us embarking on a property management strategy to generate income from other sources?
I'm afraid I won't be able to comment on that in detail, other than I think in common with a lot of other local authorities, the council has had a reduction in its funding from central government in terms of revenue support grant, and part of the way to offset that is to look at other ways of turning alternative income. As to the actual details around Camberley Town Centre, I'm not able to answer tonight.
Thank you.
Sorry, for clarity, I just want to clarify it for the notes as well. We are talking about the historical stuff, not the stuff we are going to do or not going to do going forward, because that's nothing to do with this one, correct?
I think all strategies are designed to be updated and referred to referred back to at any time. So they should never be the standard benchmark we work to.
Thank you very much. I was just being naughty there, but thank you. Right, moving on. No other questions on this one. Oh, Councillor Hawkins.
It's not a question, it's just a thank you, because I witted on for ages that I think RAG is a blunt instrument, and I'm delighted to see that we have now number rating within the RAG, which is actually so much better. So thank you for that. And it's no longer quite such a blunt instrument as it was. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Moving on. Okay, if that's it, number 12. Number 12, this report is going to come to the committee today. I took the prerogative, as chair's prerogative, to postpone it because I did not want the report to be circulated at the last minute, because it's an important report for us to discuss. So it will be coming at the next meeting. So that's off the agenda. And I have informed my vice chair of that. But, okay, got it. ISO 9001 is item number 13. That I think I'm going to hand that to the Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. This relates to a discussion at full council based on a motion brought by Councillor Cliff Betton and seconded by Councillor Graham Alleyway and agreed by full council, which was a request for the Chief Executive to review the applicability of ISO 9001 in terms of its application to council functions. I have set out in the report my findings. I have to admit, members, that in this room, I am probably one of the individuals with the least experience. I'm surrounded by many members who have many years and much more knowledge of the subject than me. It's given me an opportunity to get up to speed, to find out what's happening across local government, to look at how the standard is being applied, and particularly where it could add value and where it wouldn't add value. And I hope that I've set that out in the report. This is a report that ultimately needs to go to full council. So one of the purposes of bringing it here is to gather as much feedback from yourselves so that the report that goes to full council best reflects the situation we're in and the best way forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Any questions or comments or statements? Councillor Allaway.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The review of the 9001 adoption boils down to two key points in my view. One, cost of the certification versus the perceived financial benefits. And two, the adoption of the quality management principles and processes to enhance customer satisfaction. So on my first point, regarding certification, I would concur. The costs need to be justified to the public purse. Unless our client residents are demanding certification, or we tender to supply very profitable services where 9001 is a requirement, or the government edicts you will get certified, then the figures quoted for certification would need to be balanced with tangible evidence of financial return to warrant the cost of certification and ongoing costs. And I take this to be the business case referred to. The second point, regarding adoption of principles and processes for improvements, well, why wouldn't you? Unless there are never any examples of non-conformity and perfect performance is the norm, then there is always opportunities for improvement. And given the 9001 processes are not rocket science, I would, and I am sure residents would expect, that all reasonable measures be adopted to improve performance. Surrey Heath Borough Council is not a manufacturer, it's a service provider. And 9001 applies to service providers. Whether all councils choose to get certified is their choice, but all councils should strive to deliver service excellence. Analysis of what they do and their processes is not only a 9001 principle, it's basic good management practice. Having been in industry for close on 50 years with significant involvement in the quality field, I automatically think in enhancing satisfaction and reducing non-conformity. So regarding the three proposed options in section 3 of this paper, I would suggest that option 3 paragraph is clarified to read certification in place of implementation. The organisation does not need to be certified to yield the benefits of 9001 through implementation. The remainder of that paragraph is essentially endorsing option 1, to use appropriate quality management tools to enhance service delivery and efficiencies. 9001 provides that framework and is its essential objective. Lastly, I would take issue with paragraph 7.4, community engagement. I don't recall that the direct question of 9001's certification being put to the community in the consultation. I would suggest that the mentioned interested parties, such as residents, businesses, or partners in the private, voluntary, or statutory sectors, would fundamentally expect the council to use all contemporary business management tools to enhance performance and service satisfaction. In summary, I would recommend option 1 to adopt the principles and practices of 9001-2015 be chosen and be an example of progressive leadership for other councils to follow for the benefit of their residents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Allaway. Appreciate your comments, and I'm sure Mr. Roberts has made a note of it, and he would add it to his notes to come to the full council. Any other comments? Councillor Black.
Thank you. Yeah, ISO 9001, I'm not a big fan. It's not Margaret Thatcher's greatest legacy. I think a couple of points, and then I do have a question. I did try to submit a written question, but I think
No, you can make a statement.
I didn't quite know how to do it. So you can't inspect quality into the process. You've got to design quality into the process, okay? And ISO 9000 isn't going to design the process for you. It's just going to audit whether you're conforming to the process. And I think what the council needs right now is to give the chief executive some headroom so he can continue building his team, get good people in, get them to design good processes, and that's the most strategic thing we could do as a council right now, not bring in something like ISO 9001. I did have a question, I'll read it out. So the recommendation, which I agree with, is to embed the key principles that underpin the ISO 9001 and related quality and customer service frameworks. However, my point is this, the frameworks identified in the report have a very wide range of philosophies on what effective quality management principles are. And can we be assured, if the recommendation is agreed to, the following principles, which are so often embedded into such initiatives, including ISO 9001, will be avoided. So these are the gotchas, okay? Please can we make sure that we don't, one, assume conformance to process is the same as doing valuable work. Two, measuring conformance to process, including service levels, rather than measuring and understanding process performance. And forcing variable demand into standardised processes, which just creates additional costs when they don't meet the user's needs. And you could write a chapter on every single one of those sentences, but that's my question.
Chairman, I'm very grateful to Councillor Black. That's a very informed set of comments. There is a real risk, I think, with ISO 9000 in that it can lock a service in to what you would probably describe as compliance, but compliance with the status quo, not compliance with high quality and excellence. And I think the one thing that I've picked up as part of reviewing this is that there is an absolute commitment from members and officers for improvement, particularly in areas of customer service, responsiveness, efficiency. And those are things that the new corporate management team are fully committed to delivering. And the risk of ISO 9000 taken in isolation is that it could have the opposite effect. Councillor Black and I spoke about the idea that once you have something that's excellent, then you make sure you have the processes and the policies to maintain it and hopefully keep it under regular review. But until that point, sometimes some of these approaches can get in the way of that and create more process and red tape than the improvement that I know everybody is seeking. So I would be very happy to support the comments that Councillor Black has made and ensure that they're referenced in the report as part of the recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm going to preface my comments by saying don't worry, Damien, you are much more of an expert on this than I am. So I'm just coming to this from a layman's perspective. And the way I understand this is a process or a set of whatever to make the council better. That was the intention of Councillor Betton's motion, and that's the intent. I don't understand what ISO 9001 is, but from my understanding, it is to make the council better. And surely, and I accept the points that when something is embedded, it's hard the council will then not want to get rid of it. But surely, as an organisation that's led by members, we have an overriding scrutiny capacity of the council. So if we were to implement this and it was then proven to not be working, we as this council can decide to get rid of it. I think it comes across as a lack of willingness to try it. Really, that's the way some of the comments have come across, that I don't know. On a point regarding the options, I think option 2 is a non-starter. I think in the financial climate that this council is in, I don't know how I could justify spending up to £265,000 on consultants. I think the use of consultants is a practice we as a council need to stop, really. We need to actually use our money better. There are always times when we need to use consultants, but my time at the council, it seems that there's been a position to just go to a consultant rather than exploring an issue. So option 2, I think, and I'm pretty sure this would be well supported within the chamber, option 2 is a non-starter, no matter it is. I would encourage option 1. I think it's a way forward that we can explore it further and take it to full council for where I'm sure there will be a debate like this. But I think it's really important that we don't just cut something off because it may one day not be what we like. I think that's a real closed mentality of thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. I'm sure Mr. Roberts, unless of course you want to make a comment.
Just very quickly, and thank you, Councillor Rice, for your comments. And I think it is really important that the council doesn't shut off areas of, I guess you describe it as tools. We want to have the biggest tool bag we can, and we want to apply the best tool for the job in every case. And sometimes the challenge with these overarching quality assurance arrangements is they try and meet every eventuality. The principles, I think, are valid, but sometimes the certification process can be a bit onerous for certain sorts of services. We're quite lucky in Surrey Heath because we have a live example, just been through the ISO 9001 process for building control. We did it because the whole building control industry set this as an expectation on the back of the Grenfell fire. It was all about compliance, all about making sure whichever part of the country you're in, you always got the same thing. And we have a very good performing building control service, has a good market share and a really good reputation, and they've just been through this whole process. And I sat down with the manager and I said to her, Sam Hallam, so how was it? Cost, time, benefit. So the good news was a lot of the costs were covered nationally because it was a national initiative, so that was great. So we didn't have the level of costs that we would for services that described in the report. She confirmed it took a lot of her time, so it wasn't something that she had to divert her attention from things she was already doing to do this. And while she hasn't got certification yet, because we're stuck in a queue, because there's a backlog nationally, all the work has been done. So I said to her, okay, now that you've done it, have you seen some actual tangible benefits? And she said no. For all of that work and the costs that were covered nationally, her service is no better than it was before she started the process. Now that might be because it was already really good. She already had good policies and procedures. She already had a lot of the principles covered off. Maybe for other services it might add more value, and that's why that open mind, I think, is so important.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Councillor Wheeler, then Councillor Page.
Thank you. I'm still going through my ISO as a relatively small organisation that supplies into government and public body contracts. It's something that I have to have. It is undoubtedly a painful process the first time you go through it, and I'm not surprised that the person that you spoke to found it painful. The one thing it does give, though, is clear auditability and clear process. And we have had a number of instances, which I won't go into in an open chamber, whereby we haven't had clear processes, and we have, as a result of that, had a problem occur because there isn't a process to follow. So the very underpinning thing, the whole thing that underpins ISO 9001, irrespective of how painful it is, actually cannot help but improve our services, and at the very least have very clear auditability. And that's cross-department. It's not just within building services. So building services may have a fantastic set of ISO soon-to-be accredited processes, but how do those relate to planning enforcement? How do they relate to the beginning of the planning process and the initial engagement? And where is the responsibility for those crossover points? And that, for me, is a really important thing that, in my experience, we do a really good job, but sometimes it's very difficult to evidence it. And when things go wrong, it's very difficult to evidence it because we have an awful lot of intelligence that sits within individual council officers. And that cannot help but put us at risk.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Wheeler. If you don't mind, let me first hand it over to Councillor Page, and then maybe you can reply back to both of them.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm old enough to know about ISO 9001 because in my early career I was a lead auditor for ISO 9001 when it was called BS 5750. And I take the point that it's a brilliant tool if you're making precision instruments, or it's great in the oil and gas industry. And I'm sure that from Councillor Betton's point of view, if you mix the wrong chemical with another chemical, organic with inorganic, you're going to get problems. So I see the value in it within the manufacturing area, within research and development. I don't see that it works within a council where we have to make decisions and be agile about things that change. and change is very rapid around the public service. So I would also make the point that I like option 1, but I'd like to merge it with option 3. Option 3 sings to me better because we have in place very recently a change in the management structure at the senior level within this council. And I'd like to see that senior level embed itself and see the benefits of that over a period of time. So I'm not into the bureaucracy that it would launch this council into and the money spent on it. So if we could look at a blend like supporting Councillor Black's points about option 1 and a blend of option 3, then that's what I would go for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Page. And Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chairman. Really, Councillor Black and Councillor Page have covered where I was coming from. I've come out of an organisation, we had about £2 billion a year turnover. We employed contractors and those that had the relevant ISO 9001 or the earlier one, BS, I think most of us in the building industry called it bull something. I can't remember what the second word was. But we found that basically they were incompetent. They were that busy filling in forms and fiddling around. They didn't get the job done on time. And yeah, I understand where Councillor Allaway was coming from, where Councillor Betton was coming from. Yeah, and I think Councillor Black really summed it up very well. It's the process. We have a process going, but I just cringe when I hear things being called process-driven, because that means it's going backwards or out the window. There's no way could we support anything that incurs the expenditure outlined in this paper. So I think we should carry on as we are. We're seeking to improve. We have a new senior team, and they're driving forward. And this has to be monitored. It has to be reviewed. And I think I have every confidence that it's going to be reviewed. So I support everything that's been said other than option 2, which is a complete no-no. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Crook. Mayor Crook.
Thank you. It's really to Damien. Have we looked at other councils? Do we know if they're using it? And has it worked for them? And in what areas they've used it?
For you, Chairman.
Go for it. Go. It's your turn now, Damien.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have. So we know that no council has adopted ISO 9001 overall. When we've looked at where it has been taken up, it tends to be in county councils or unitary councils. It tends to be large operations, so usually highly technical areas, usually with a health and safety dimension. So in areas like waste, in the care sector, so in care homes or those sorts of facilities, in areas of where you've got one function operating on a large scale, almost the opposite of a district council. So maybe around security, around CCTV, but on a city scale rather than a borough scale. There's very little in borough and districts. Building control probably now represents the main area that's consistent because it's a national initiative. So the take-up has been very low. I implemented ISO 9001 in a London borough in a function called social care inspection, when local authorities were responsible for inspection services before it went across to CQC. But that was at a point when local government was trying to implement ISO 9001, but it wasn't successful. And many of those councils who tried didn't find the benefits and stopped and sort of withdrew.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Rice.
I think the Chief Executive has just made the point I made earlier, that you can actually proceed with something, and if it does not work, you can stop. And I appreciate the experience that other councillors have brought to me, but that to me doesn't suggest that we shouldn't go ahead with it or actually explore how it can be used in the borough. I'm not, even if it is just in building control, or if we want to apply it to the housing services department and not other areas. I think it warrants further exploration. But, what the Chief Executive has just said, they implemented it, it did not work, they got rid of it, which I think goes against what was kind of hinted at earlier, that once you've put it in place, you're stuck with it forever. It's really clearly not the truth. So I think that's really important, that it's important that we actually explore it. And if it doesn't work, we as a council or the next set of councillors after the next borough election should be confident in saying, you know what, it hasn't worked.
Yep.
Get rid of it.
All right, thank you very much.
Chairman,
sorry.
it's only because I maybe just comment on some of the other contributions. So one of the things I think that has come up, and it's certainly been commented by this committee, is the issue of auditability of some of our activities and the need in some areas to have robust processes where processes don't exist. Now, there are parts of the council, including the way that the democratic process works, the running of meetings, the running of full council, that is backed up by a constitution. It's very detailed, it's reviewed regularly, it's got a statutory legislation context, but there's a lot of opportunity for adapting it locally over time. And so there are parts of the council where we have really excellent processes built up with lots of knowledge and expertise, opportunities for members to influence it over time. And I think members will also be aware that there are parts of our activities that aren't as robust and would benefit from having more processes. And I think that's a journey that the new corporate management team is on. We want to make sure that we can be confident about the performance and quality of our services, and that built into the culture is a desire to constantly look at how we can better what we did in the past. And that's about being targeted, it's about focusing on the areas where you're going to get the biggest benefit and drawing upon the widest tool set. And ISO 9001 and quality assurance arrangements are one of those tools. And I'm sure at some point there will be an opportunity where there's a perfect match between what we're looking for and what that offers. But there might also be a bunch of other tools that we might reach to as well, either first or afterwards. So the idea that we take what's useful, if it works, it's great, we keep it. If it doesn't work, we try something else. I think is a really healthy philosophy. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Levy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just listening to the discussion here, and there seems to be a lot of misinformation or misconception of what it's about, actually. I mean, no matter what business you're in, I mean, 5750 was a manufacturing quality system. That's gone. 9001 replaced that. It applies to service industries, and we are a service provider, so it is absolutely appropriate. It is fairly generic, high level, but as an example, non-conformity control will come across all functions. What do you do when something doesn't happen as it should do? And how do you process that? And how do you fix it? And how do you look at the risks from those occurrences happening? Control the documents. Yeah, control the documents. Documents flying everywhere in this organisation. And some elements appear to be well controlled, but some aren't. I mean, I downloaded a document register off the website hadn't been looked at since 2004. It didn't have the documents on there that I was looking for, which we use. So, you know, there's just two examples of where 9001 principles and processes can be applied easily.
Thank you for that, Councillor Levy. I want to actually wrap this up. If there are one more comment.
I would like to propose an amendment to the Office of Rapport.
Yep.
To remove option 2 from section 3.2. I think while I'm assuming there is wide support for removing that option before it even goes to council, I'm not willing to support that. So I would propose that we would remove 3.2, which is option 2 in its entirety, and then renumber accordingly.
Any seconder on that?
I'd second that. Thank you very much.
Are you a member of the committee? No, you're not. Good try, though. Adrian, seriously, I know who my committee members are. Sorry, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Hawkins is seconding it. Thank you very much for that. Sorry. All those in favour? Option 2. Remove option, that's what I meant.
It's all right, I'm not counting, Adrian. Okay, lovely, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. That's carried. Yeah, I assumed it'll be unanimous, hence I didn't take a vote. But I want to make a statement on this whole thing before it's all been carried and presented to the council. I do agree, 265,000 is one heck of a lot of money for the council. So that's completely off the scale. Reality is that I have implemented ISO 9001 in the organization I work. It's a good standard to maintain, and Councillor Allaway is absolutely right. There are a lot of statements made which are not strictly correct, because ISO 9001, if you want to drop it, you can drop it anytime you want. It just kind of gives you a gold standard, gold badge to go on and produce things. I mean, classic example, you guys have used it, I'm repeating it, is the planning. I mean, if there's a process, it's a process. And we make sure that process is controlled, done properly, so on and so forth. And procurement is another process, which can go into this whole thing. So that's my comment on it. If ISO 9001 can be implemented internally with the least amount of cost, I would actually support it. For the moment, this is what's going to the full council as a recommendation from PNF. If that's the end of that, we move on to, that's it, isn't it? Oh, God. No, that's what I'm going to for work program. That's exactly what I'm going on to. Sorry, Councillor Rice.
Thank you very much. And I prefaced my points earlier. Well, you just called me. Well, you've called.
I have been calling for this for some time because I find PNF meetings are getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And this is something we truly have to start. I mean, I'm talking to officers now, and then democratic services have to try and control. No, you don't set the pace. You do not set the pace. We set the pace. I totally agree. We have to scrutinize it, but we have to find space within the calendar to hold one more meeting, because we cannot carry on every meeting for 3 hours from 7 to 10. I mean, this is just getting rather silly. The thing is that it gets tedious and people get irritated. I mean, like Councillor Rice is irritated because he wanted to speak and I didn't let him speak just now. So that's life, because this is my part of the agenda. So I have spoken to the officers, and they have promised that they would, if you don't mind, Councillor Hawkins.
Sorry, Chairman, I'm just congratulating Morgan now and Councillor Rice as against Rise.
Oh, please, give me a break. It's a long day, Edward. So I think, CEO, you really need to take this away and look at it. We have to have one more meeting. I need to split this whole agenda up, because if it's more than, like today, it's about 13, 14 items. If Task and Finish group had come in, right, we wouldn't even finish at 10 o'clock. Can you kindly make a note of it and come back? Councillor Rice now.
Thank you, Chairman. And in all honesty, one more meeting is not enough. Frankly, since I've been a member of this committee, the agenda has gotten bigger and bigger, and we are spending more time discussing items. And I think, in all honesty, it's unfair on officers. They are required to prepare these reports. They're then required to come and sit here, wait till their item is then brought up. And as the evening gets on, councillors get more irritated, or they get less engaged with the topic that's being discussed. I think, frankly, there needs to be a complete reassessment of the number of meetings we have each year. I mean, for the 9th of March meeting, we have the third quarter finance report, which will be a very, very big issue, 2 executive portfolio updates, and the committee work programme. And I suspect there will be even more agenda items added when it comes to the chairman's briefing. So I think it's essential that we actually take this seriously and not just, and I think my proposal will be that we actually increase the number of meetings much more than one, there needs to be at least
I'm
three
going
more
to,
meetings.
Councillor, with all due respect, I'm going to leave it to the officers to come back to me, because at the end of the day, because I have given them the brief that we cannot carry on like this. And it's got to be, we need to scrutinize items rather than skim through items. This is just rather crazy.
No, I'm actually going to agree with Councillor Wheeler in the sense I think there has to be, I'm going to make a proposal. I propose that we schedule 3 more meetings for the rest of this year or the next municipal year to actually address, to get through the agenda items.
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it, Councillor D.
Sorry, can I just...
Sorry, Councillor Officer Catherine.
Just so you're aware, under the terms of reference for this committee, we are only allowed to have 6 meetings of this committee a year. So I'm just putting that out there. We are looking at trying to get one in sort of June, July. So we've got a July meeting scheduled, and we're going to see if we can get a June one in as well. The committee cycle is hugely busy. So unless we start having meetings on a Friday evening, yeah.
Sorry.
Chairman,
who can change the terms of reference? Us?
It's in the Constitution, so Constitution, cross-party members, working party to start with, and then full council. But Chairman, also, because we're heading towards the budget setting time of the year, democratic services are resourced to provide the meetings that are set out in the Constitution at the moment. So that's just another dimension. There are 2 options, really, when you've got a lot of work. You either create more meetings to accommodate it, or you have to prioritise even more strongly on the areas that is of greatest concern or where you feel as a committee you can add the greatest value. And certainly as officers, we would absolutely want to support you in whatever options you went for.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'd like to add additional option, and that is there should be the opportunity to potentially meet informally via Zoom or an alternative means to discuss some of the papers that are coming forward as a committee before meeting formally as a committee, which I think would cut down a lot of time, potentially certainly within the meeting. So I would like to make the following proposals: that we recommend to the, it's the cross-party working constitution, that this committee makes a recommendation to that constitution that this committee is increased to have the flexibility to run a minimum of 8 meetings per municipal year. If it's currently a maximum of 6, to increase it to 8, which is a compromise. That I don't think we are giving due justice to the amount of effort that goes into the reports, because I don't think there is sufficient time to scrutinise, and sometimes, in most cases actually, those reports generate a request for additional information. So if we could have essentially a working, I don't know, not a subcommittee, but a cross-party working group, which consists of all of the committee members that are related to this committee. If we could schedule those in, I haven't brought the Constitution with me. How do we go about requesting a working group? It normally comes to it's full council. Okay, so I would like to propose then that as a committee, we make that proposal to full council for it to be signed off, for the wording, the final wording of that proposal to be agreed by the chair in consultation. Is there a seconder for that?
I think we got the idea. Councillor Ditch, then Councillor Hawkins, and then going to hand it back to the CEO to wrap it up, because this can't carry on. That's my bottom line. Councillor Ditch.
Okay. What Victoria has just suggested there actually is what we do at County Council, more or less. So we have committee pre-meetings. So ahead of the committee, we'll have a pre-meeting. It does actually work very well, because what you do is a lot of the discussion is actually held there. And then among all the councillors, cross-party, we decide which areas we are going to drill down on at the actual committee meeting. And what it does, it makes it flow a lot better. I'm not in favour, to be honest with you, in adding more meetings to our schedule. Formal committee meetings, that is. But I think that if we just get a bit more organised in terms of pre-meetings, and they tend to last, we had one today actually, they tend to last about 45 minutes. They run quite smoothly. And I think that will actually solve the problem, because you get a lot of the detail taken out of the actual committee, and then you can really focus on the scrutiny.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chairman. The word scrutiny has been mentioned twice just now. This is a scrutiny meeting, and we're not scrutinising anything, quite frankly.
Correct.
Agree. And I think that we need to have a look at this, and I think we need to put this back to Chief Executive and Democratic Services, not to necessarily to look at the frequency of the meetings, but I would suggest that the Governance Working Group actually look at the number of committees, number of meetings we have, because to shoehorn another meeting in an evening is fine, but those of us on different working groups, I'm just counting up, I think I'm on 5 different working groups, you're on a number, you're on, we've got, it's not just the meetings, it's all the working groups that go with, it's the workload we're putting on the officers, and I think I would turn it on its head and say, I'm sure the Chief Executive recognises there is a problem. There is an issue with the number of meetings, bloody meetings. Let's ask the executive team, to have a look at the number of meetings. Do we need them? Should we be having them? Number of committees? Just look at all of this. It's going to take a while to wash through the system. So it's not going to answer the immediate issue, but we've got just over a year now before the end of this council term. And maybe it's something that would kick in for the next council. We've still got a problem. So maybe we'll pick up what Paul has been saying, about having an interim meeting, having an informal meeting. Maybe it's an informal meeting with the members without officers. We could be doing, there's lots of things we could do, tweak. Or we could have an informal meeting without the chairman, maybe. Yes, yeah, we could do that. But seriously, that would be a suggestion.
You'd love that, wouldn't you guys?
Well, the two of us here. But the serious point is, we should be looking at this whole thing and turning on its head, and rather than just trying to come to an instant solution, bat it back and say, can you please have a look at this? Because the nature of the work that we're doing as a council is becoming more intricate, is more detailed. It's the workload on us as councillors as well as the officers. So I think we'd like to just take a break and look at the whole thing holistically.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hawkins. I mean, that's exactly what I was saying earlier. Hand it back to the officers, let them go away. Councillor Ditch makes a valid point. Look at the working methodology, come back to us with a proposal to make this committee a lot more efficient, lot more, so we can scrutinise it better. If it means having sub-meetings prior to this meeting, or formal meeting, let's go for it. I mean, do we want to put it down as a formal proposal or not?
Can I just say you've got 3 minutes?
I know. I'm desperately...
Chair, we don't need it. We don't need it as
we don't need a formal. So it's my original stance was correct, which is handing to the CEO.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yep, and come back to us with the right proposal, and we finish literally 3 minutes before. Yes, correct. And also, before we go, I understand county has, I mean, this again for the CEO to take away, county is holding all meetings virtually. So why are we meeting in a building? If county can do it, why can't we do it? County is doing it virtually.
So in order to members to take decisions, you have to be physically present.
So
those councils who, where members aren't meeting, there is bound to be a delegation to the chief exec to take all the decisions that members might otherwise take.
How it's happening in county, but yeah.
So we are subcontractor the work, decision making to the officers.
But it's not something that I'm asking for, Chairman. I think it's we're following the rules, and members are.
So are we going
taking
to
the
are we
decisions.
going to ask for the county councillors to take a pay cut?